Chapter 426. Both of you came at the right time. I'm going out for a while. Why don't you come and take a look together? Yang Sen stood up when he saw Renbachien. Does it have anything to do with us? Renbachien asked. A little. Let's talk on the way, Yang Sen said. Yang Sen spoke after the three cars had driven out of the underground parking lot of the Messier 87 building. Speaking of which, this matter doesn't have much to do with the two of you. Instead, it has something to do with the cultivation method that the two of you brought. Following Yang Sen's narration, Renbachien found out about something interesting. A man-wheel expert had appeared on Earth, a true man-wheel expert. Furthermore, he was an outsider and had to train hard to reach this level. One had to know that Earth did not have systematic cultivation techniques like the other world. Although there were also people who cultivated Taoism, Buddhism, or martial arts, they walked a completely different path. Due to the limitations of the environment, it was difficult for him to achieve too much. After Renbachien took out the martial arts manual, a group of such experts broke through to the man-will level in a short period of time. However, this person had read extensively, summed up the experiences of the predecessors, and after many years of hard work, he created a set of martial arts that could allow him to attain the man-will level. This was something that not many people could achieve. From this point alone, this person could be considered to be extremely outstanding. The problem was not this, but something else. This person had been training hard for many years and broke through the limit in one fell swoop to reach the man-will level. He was full of mettle and thought that he was the #1 expert in the world. He thought to himself that since ancient times, no one could surpass him. Based on the foundation of his predecessors, he had taken a huge step forward in his cultivation method and reached a new realm. He had trained hard for decades and was invincible in the world. He couldn't possibly continue to hole up in the mountains, right? If one does not return to one's hometown after becoming rich, it is like walking at night in brocade clothes. This person had been holding back for decades, so he naturally wouldn't act like this now. Instead, he was preparing to become famous overnight. He sent out hero invitations to the so-called Wulin people and set up a challenge to meet all the heroes of the world. If it was just based on the advancement of his cultivation method, it was admirable. Unfortunately, he was a little too arrogant. Hundreds of experts who had attained the man-wheel level through the techniques provided by Renbachien were ready to surround and kick him. A certain person had trained hard in the deep mountains for dozens of years, and when he came out, he thought that he was #1 in the world. In the end, the outside world had changed, and even a child had such strength. That was roughly what it meant. It was very graphic, but also very unlucky. If Renbachien hadn't provided him with the martial arts, he would have become famous overnight and everyone in the world would have recognized him. Even in history, his name would be recorded. Unfortunately, Renbachien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This person was indeed somewhat tragic. However, Yang Sen didn't let Renbachien and the Empress follow him just to see him. Instead, he looked at the people that the country nurtured. After all, their previous accumulations had already been exhausted after they entered the man-will level, so their cultivation speed would be very slow. He had long wanted to get pointers from Renbachien and the Empress, but the two of them often didn't go to Messier 87 for a few months. This time around, he took this opportunity to pull them over. This was especially so for the Empress. She came from a blessed land, and her strength far exceeded the limits of a human. If she could give him some pointers, he would be able to avoid a lot of detours. After understanding Yang Sen's thoughts, Renbachien turned his head and looked at the Empress. He saw that she was in a daze and did not know what she was thinking about. Renbachien reckoned that she was still thinking about Qijiu. After driving for about 2 hours, they finally arrived at their destination. It was a villa district. There was a very large courtyard in front of a villa in the corner. In the middle of the courtyard was an arena that was surrounded by many people of all ages and genders. Some of them were holding weapons wrapped in cloth. From the shape, one could roughly tell that they were sabers or swords. There were also some that were wrapped so tightly that one couldn't tell what they were. One of them was a middle-aged man in a traditional Chinese suit. He had short hair and looked very energetic. His eyes were extremely lively when he closed them. Yang Sen led Renbachien and the Empress down, and someone immediately led them to the side to sit down. Director Yang. The people nearby greeted him in a low voice. Their voices weren't loud. After all, Yang Sen was an official, and it wasn't good to make a big fuss in this kind of place. After waiting for a long time, a group of people came out of the villa. One of them was tall and had a square face. His eyes were extremely lively, and he had a slight smile on his face. This person stood in the crowd and was the most eye-catching. Everyone sat down in the arena. Just now, someone went up to the stage to speak. Today, many people have gathered here. I believe it's because of the recent news. Senior Bai has mastered the martial arts of various sects and has finally taken another step forward on the path of the predecessors. After listening to the first two sentences, Rinpoche started to feel a little bored. To put it bluntly, he was just bragging about his own achievements and then opening up the arena to meet the heroes. Will Senior Bai publicize this kind of martial arts? Someone in the surrounding crowd suddenly asked. As soon as this was said, a group of people immediately followed suit. After all, these people weren't here to fight in the arena, but to find a way to break through the limits. The person on the stage smiled faintly before continuing. If other people obtained this kind of martial arts, they naturally wouldn't publicize it. However, as the founder, Senior Bai is magnanimous and doesn't care about sectarian bias. He is willing to publicize his many years of painstaking efforts and compile the martial scripture, together with everyone. Following that, there was another uproar. Many people were asking what exactly this meant. It turned out that this time, not only did this person invite the heroes, but he also wanted to invite them to compile the martial scripture, together with the martial arts of various sects into it. As soon as this was said, the people below the stage immediately hesitated. Senior Bai, as the world's most powerful person, is willing to publicize this kind of martial arts and compile it into the martial scripture. Could it be that everyone still wants to retain the sectarian bias? That person on the stage asked. The world's most powerful person? Who admits it? Someone suddenly shouted from below. When Rinpoche heard this, he finally perked up. Finally, there was going to be some excitement. He didn't come here to watch them have a big meeting. That so-called Senior Bai wasn't angry after hearing this. He stood up from his seat, and the joints in his body cracked. Then he flashed and landed on the stage. His graceful movements attracted a lot of cheers. We can talk about the martial scripture later. This time, I invited everyone because I want to see the experts of this world. I wonder who would like to come up and have a look? The middle-aged man on the stage said in a clear voice. In his heart, he calculated that no matter what, there would definitely be objections. He would first show his martial arts on the stage and let them see it. Then, the rest would be much easier to discuss. He was still confident in his own martial arts. It wasn't that he looked down on the heroes of the world. In his eyes, except for him, everyone else was mediocre. I'll go. Immediately, someone jumped onto the stage. My name is Yang Huai, and I'm just a nobody. I want to see what the so-called world's most powerful person is capable of. The person who jumped onto the stage was a man in his early 30s with a very vigorous aura. Yang Sen, who was drinking tea below, immediately coughed when he saw the person who jumped onto the stage. He whispered to the side, "You should at least let him win 2 rounds. Why is he the first to go up? You can't slap him in the face like this." Previously, this Bai Yuha was very arrogant. Yang Huai has been suppressing his anger for a long time to teach him a lesson, the person beside him whispered. When Rinpoche saw Yang Sen's reaction, he immediately knew that this was a nurtured expert. At this moment, he was in high spirits. After all, he was also a man-will expert, and he really wanted to see what the other man-will experts were like. Especially on Earth, he grew up reading wuxia novels and wuxia movies. He had always been curious about martial arts such as Xingyi Quan, Liuhe Quan, Taiji Quan, and Baguazheng. Chapter 427. Rinpoche focused his attention on the stage and waited to see the standard of the two. Although he wasn't very strong, he still had some eyesight. After all, in Dayo, spirit will experts were everywhere, and earth will experts were inferior to dogs. He had seen many people with such strength, so his eyesight had also improved. Yang Huai didn't reveal anything when he jumped onto the stage. It was obvious that he didn't want his opponent to see his standard and was aiming to slap him in the face. Bai Yuhe was indeed fooled. Number 1 in the world. Although it's a compliment, I think I'm worthy of it. Bai Yuhe smiled. Although his tone was plain, the arrogance in his words couldn't be concealed. After all, he had advanced the martial arts of the predecessors by a huge step. This was something that many people couldn't achieve. Just this point alone was enough for him to be proud of. Unfortunately, he was wrong from the start. Times had changed. He had stayed in the mountains for decades to practice the peerless martial arts, but he fell behind the times the moment he came out. We'll know after we try. Yang Huai stood opposite him and said. Everyone below was attentively waiting to see the match between the two. Both of them cupped their fists and greeted each other. This was etiquette. No matter what they thought, they still had to have basic etiquette. Martial ethics and etiquette had always been a part of traditional culture and were deeply ingrained in everyone's bones. After greeting each other, Bai Yuhe stretched out one hand and got into a half stance. He was waiting for his opponent to attack. He had made up his mind to win this first match beautifully. If both of them fought for half a day and barely won, he wouldn't be able to show off his skills. Seeing his stance, Yang Huai moved his feet and punched his opponent's chest. This punch whistled through the air, and Bai Yuhe was shocked. He couldn't see anything before, but from this punch, he could immediately tell that his opponent's strength wasn't much weaker than his. How is this possible? Bai Yuhe was shocked. He had reached this stage through deducing techniques and believed that he was far superior to the practitioners of today. How was it possible that someone who jumped onto the stage was at the same level as him? However, he didn't slow down at all and immediately exchanged blows with his opponent. The two of them exchanged a few blows, and everyone below became nervous. Whether it was speed or strength, the two of them were far superior to everyone else. The people below admitted that if they were the ones up there, they would probably be defeated within 2 blows. Although the strength of a man-will expert was only at the standard of an ordinary person in Dayo, it was actually far superior. One had to know that the strength of a man-will expert was between 500 to 1,500 kilograms. Some gifted individuals could even exceed this amount. This is the strength of the arms. Previously, both of them had a much better foundation than Rinpoche. After attaining the man-will level, their strength was now around 700 to 800 kilograms, which was far beyond what an ordinary person could compare with. In terms of speed, they were much faster than ordinary people. Ordinary people would not be able to see their movements clearly. For a time, they could only hear the sound of their bodies colliding. It was within everyone's expectations that Bai Yuhe possessed such strength. But the fact that Yang Huai, who had suddenly jumped onto the stage to challenge him, had such strength was beyond everyone's expectations. Immediately, many people started asking around. Which sect did this person come from? Who was his master? How could no one have heard of such an expert? Many people started to rejoice in Bai Yuhe's misfortune. Bai Yuhe had just ascended the stage, and he had already encountered such an expert. This was going to be interesting. Their physical fitness was about the same. What mattered now was the level of their punches and kicks. Although Bai Yuhe was a little arrogant, his wisdom could be seen from the fact that he was able to advance the martial arts of his predecessors by a huge step. Not only was he proficient in martial arts, but his punches and kicks were also extremely skilled. After exchanging 7 or 8 blows, Bai Yuhe's arm was like a huge spear as he blocked Yang Huai's crotch, sending him flying off the stage. Good skills. Bai Yuhe only stopped and praised Yang Huai after sending him off the stage. Let me try too. The other person immediately jumped onto the stage and asked, Do you want to take a break? Bai Yuhe cupped his fists and said, Let's begin. As the two of them exchanged blows, Bai Yuhe's face immediately turned strange. This person's strength was actually about the same as his and wasn't any weaker than the previous opponent. Where did these two experts come from? Bai Yuhe guessed. What made him even more puzzled was the other party's strength and speed. He had only reached this level after breaking through that boundary, so how did they achieve it? After another 7 or 8 blows, Bai Yuhe threw his opponent off the stage. Without waiting for him to catch his breath, another person jumped onto the stage. "Let me try too." Bai Yuhe was speechless. This person's strength was actually about the same as his, and the difference between them was actually only in terms of punches and kicks. They were actually about the same in terms of physical fitness that he was most proud of, which allowed him to break through the boundary. How could he not be shocked? Previously, when the first and second people were fighting, he thought that they were exceptionally talented and would walk the same path as him. However, when 3 people like them jumped onto the stage consecutively, he began to feel that something was wrong. Not only did he feel that something was wrong, but the others also felt that something was wrong. These 3 people were all young, around 25 to 30 years old. Moreover, judging from their moves, they were obviously not from the same sect, yet they all had such strength. How could the audience not be suspicious? When the 4th person jumped onto the stage, Bai Yuhe began to ponder what exactly went wrong. When the 4th person was beaten off the stage, he had no choice but to rest on the stage for a while, and his expression began to fluctuate. He believed that his achievements had already surpassed those of his predecessors and far surpassed those of his generation. As soon as he left the mountain, he couldn't wait to challenge the outstanding heroes. He didn't expect 4 such experts to come up one after another. Were there too many experts in this world, or was he too weak? What exactly was going on? He began to doubt himself. Could it be that something big had happened in the outside world, that someone had already broken through to this level and announced it? However, as far as he knew, such a thing hadn't happened in the past few days. But what was going on now? After he had rested enough, a 5th person jumped onto the stage. This person was actually slightly stronger than the previous 4. This time, the 2 of them exchanged 30 to 40 moves, and he barely won by 1 move. Then, a 6th person jumped onto the stage. Bai Yuhe's face turned ashen. It wasn't that he couldn't beat them. He thought that he was already the number 1 expert in the world after breaking through to this level. He didn't expect that a few random people who jumped onto the stage would all be this strong. Was the world changing too quickly, or was he ignorant? Could it be that everyone in the outside world was this strong? Wasn't his actions a joke? He wasn't the only one who felt this way. The audience felt the same way as well. They weren't blind, and they could naturally tell that the people who were fighting on the stage were stronger than them. It was easy to understand if 1 or 2 of such people appeared, but when so many of them appeared at once, they began to wonder if they were useless. The nation had nurtured these people through Rinpoche's martial arts. This time, they only wanted to give Bai Yuhe a slap in the face, but they didn't expect that they would destroy the confidence of Bai Yuhe and the others. "This person isn't bad," Rinpoche whispered to Yang Senator. It was already very impressive that he was able to create a method to break through to the man-will level by integrating the methods of the predecessors. After all, creating a new path was the most difficult. Such a person wouldn't be lost in the crowd no matter where he went. If it wasn't for Rinpoche's martial arts, he would probably be able to advance the martial arts on Earth by a huge step. Moreover, he was also very good at fighting. Indeed, he's not bad. Yang Sen nodded. This kind of talent needed to be absorbed into the nation. Even though he asked Rinpoche and the Empress to help look after the others, he himself was here to observe Bai Yuhe. However, before absorbing him into the organization, he still had to destroy his arrogance. At this moment, Bai Yuhe had beaten the 8th person off the stage, and a self-deprecating look appeared on his face. He originally thought that he was the number 1 expert in the world, but he didn't expect that any random person would be at his level. What was the point of fighting? Perhaps even a 10-year-old child would jump out and be as strong as him. Thinking back to his decades of hard work and the ecstasy he felt from every step he took, he thought that this was the scenery of his journey to the peak. Now, looking at it again, it seemed like a joke. It was better to go back to farming. He fought 8 matches and won 8 of them. However, this self-proclaimed number 1 expert who had trained hard for decades was the first to despair. Chapter 428. I don't want to fight anymore. Bai Yuhe looked at the 9th person who jumped onto the stage with a face full of despair. There was no need to fight anymore. But Are you afraid? The ninth person who jumped onto the stage was a woman, and she looked at him coldly. I've made a fool of myself. It turns out that I'm just a frog at the bottom of a well. I'd better return to the mountains. Bayuha ignored her and waved his hand at the crowd. Everyone could see his desolation. It was better to return to the mountains to farm. This time, it was better not to go down the mountains. The so-called martial arts were just a joke. Everyone was like this, but he was still complacent and thought that he had reached a level that his predecessors couldn't reach. These 9 people made him completely lose interest. Even if he defeated the 9th person, there would still be the 10th, the 11th, the 100th. In fact, after the first person appeared, there was no longer any value for him to compete. The crowd below didn't have much of a reaction to Bayuha's words. This was because, apart from this group of experts trained by the nation, the others were also deeply doubtful. They doubted whether they had lived their entire lives as dogs. When did this world become like this? Their martial arts were even worse than Bayuha's, and they were extremely moved when they heard that Bayuha had broken through the limits of his predecessors. In particular, the skills that Bayuha displayed during the fight were enough to convince them that what he said was true. However, what was going on with these people who jumped onto the stage one after another? Regardless of their moves or experience, the strength and speed that they displayed surpassed them and reached the same level as Bayuha. One had to know that they were famous experts in the martial arts world. This time, Bayuha invited all the heroes and naturally invited famous people. However, what was going on with those people just now? All of them were experts who surpassed them, and all of them were unknown. Where did they pop out from? Could it be that Bayuha was just a paper tiger? Some people threw away the thought as soon as it popped into their heads. After all, both sides were fighting on the stage, and the people below weren't blind. Not to mention anything else, everyone could see the power and speed of both sides when they fought. The 8 fights on the stage made the people below start to doubt their lives. Could it be that the world was filled with such experts, and they were the only weaklings? Rinpoche looked at Bayuha, who exuded a bleak aura as he walked down the stage and entered the villa without looking back. Rinpoche felt a little sympathy for him. Actually, this person was quite powerful. He was able to advance his cultivation technique by a huge step. This was not something that just anyone could do. What a pity. How's it? Are you interested in giving me some pointers? Yang Sen smiled at Rinpoche. On the surface, it seemed that Rinpoche's skills were similar to those people from before. They were all at the man-wheel level, and this was easily discovered by the nation. However, Yang Sen had confidence in Rinpoche. After all, Rinpoche had traveled between Earth and the Blessed Enclave. His experience and martial arts were definitely not something these people could compare to. Forget it. Rinpoche shook his head. Even though he had practiced the Fist of Death, other than being ravaged by little Lolita, he didn't have much experience in fighting. It would be fine if they could use their guns, but it was obvious that they couldn't shoot in the arena. It mattered if Td Havel to be. It was fine if he couldn't beat someone in that world, but if he was beaten up on Earth, it would be too shameful to expose himself in front of the country. Rinpoche didn't have much confidence in close combat. It was better for him to go back and train hard for 30 to 50 years. By then, these people would have died of old age. Although he was a little cowardly, martial arts had never been his forte. In 2 years he would have reached the earthwheel level. At that time, he would be able to hang them up with one hand. Only a fool would compete with them now. Coward? Someone beside Yang Sen sneered softly. In fact, when Yang Sen and Rinpoche were talking, they had been paying attention and guessing Rinpoche's identity. They were a little dissatisfied when Yang Sen asked him to give them pointers. However, Rinpoche's refusal made them look down on him. Rinpoche tilted his head to take a look. It was a young man in his late 20s who was looking at him provocatively. Rinpoche slowly took out his pistol and pointed it at him. You might die if I punch you. Yang Sen, the rest, that was a gun in his hand. Even an immortal wouldn't be able to escape from a gun fired at such a close range. What did he mean by, I might die if I punch you? How could it be like this? Mr. Ren. Yang Sen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I'm just joking. Rinpoche laughed. What era are we living in? What's the point of practicing martial arts? It's to strengthen the body, not to be brave and ruthless. We are the successors of socialism. What we have to do is to work hard for the 4 modernizations. Fighting and killing is too outrageous. Yang Sen, it seems like you are the only one who kills people's families. How dare you say this? In fact, I have been waiting since I was a child for my motherland to call me as its successor. However, it hasn't happened yet. Ren Baqian recalled his many years of waiting and felt somewhat regretful. You will be the prince consort of Dayo in the future. What successor are you talking about? The empress was originally in a daze. When she suddenly heard Ren Baqian talk about successor, she immediately became dissatisfied. I'm just joking. Ren Baqian grabbed her hand and squeezed it. The empress squeezed it back. Ren Baqian's hand swelled visibly. Yang Sen was slightly taken aback. The empress's words revealed a lot of things. Previously, when Ren Baqian wanted weapons for war, he already knew that there were countries and wars in the Grotto Heaven world. Furthermore, this Madame Qi should be someone from that country. Ren Baqian would be a prince consort in the future, which meant that his status in the Grotto Heaven world wouldn't be low. Yang Sen thought about it and felt that this was important news. The higher Ren Baqian's status in that world, the more valuable he was. Ren Baqian turned his head and said, "Let's go. I still want to hear about the progress that you told me previously." Seeing that he said this, Yang Sen didn't force him. He informed the people beside him, got up, and left with Ren Baqian. "Mr. Ren, is your hand all right?" Yang Sen asked when he saw that Ren Baqian's hand was swollen like a pig's trotter. "It's fine. I'm used to it." Ren Baqian looked calm. Wasn't it just a little swollen? It was painful and it wouldn't hurt anymore. When Ren Baqian followed Yang Sen back, the sky was already dark. He rejected Yang Sen's invitation to have a meal and first went to understand the recent progress in the laboratory. There was a lot of progress. After all, with the help of supercomputers and various modern instruments, the progress of various research projects couldn't be compared to the past. In the past, it would take half a lifetime to calculate, verify, or discover things. Now, it would only take a few days or even a few hours. What caught Ren Baqian's attention the most were the martial arts manuals and the tests for man-wheel experts. With these man-wheel experts, the progress in the deduction of the martial arts manuals was very fast. The 4 sets of martial arts manuals that Ren Baqian brought had basically been optimized by the laboratory. The cultivation methods were more reasonable and simple. Of course, this was also related to the fact that the martial arts manuals that Ren Baqian brought were very simple. These simple martial arts manuals didn't involve many aspects, didn't have great potential, and were easier to modify. After the optimization of the laboratory, these simple martial arts manuals were much stronger than before. If the full score was 5 points, these martial arts manuals were originally 2 points for power, 2 points for cultivation speed, and 2 points for potential. After the optimization, they actually reached 5 points in all aspects, which was a forceful upgrade. Ren Baqian couldn't help but admire this kind of progress. He even wanted to hand over his Rui visualization. Another thing that Ren Baqian was concerned about was the discovery of a few new substances in the blood of the man-wheel experts cultivated in the country. One of them was an amine molecule. The laboratory named it polypropylamine, which was distributed in the blood of man-wheel experts. Its biggest function was to transform a portion of the nutrient-carrying molecules in the blood into another substance. Chapter 429. The progress made by the Messier 87 department over the past few months made Ren Baqian very happy. Although the martial arts in that world were of a high level and had their own cultivation system, they lacked the scientific research on Earth that fundamentally solved all aspects of cultivation. Given more time, when martial arts entered the army, schools, and society, Earth would enter the era of cultivation. That kind of future could be anticipated. Since martial arts already existed, it couldn't be hidden from people. There would be people practicing cultivation techniques everywhere, and the shape of the entire society would definitely change. Everyone would be impacted by this wave of change. There were some good aspects, such as the national football team finally being saved. More likely, it would cause various social problems after people gained power. However, the nation would definitely formulate a comprehensive plan to adapt to the new social form. Renbachian didn't need to consider these things, as it was something that the nation needed to consider. He was happy to see such a situation. This world had been peaceful for too long, and such changes would bring about an interesting future. As for whether such a future would have an impact on his and the Empress's current status, he wasn't worried. He was the one who stood at the peak of this era, the one who stood at the tip of the wave. Everything started with him. As for the nation, as long as the Empress advanced to longevity heaven, even if Earth was full of Earthwheel experts, she would still be a deterrent to everyone. However, there was still a long way to go before Earthwheel experts could be found everywhere. Currently, the biggest restriction on Earth wasn't only martial arts, but also food and the environment. Unless Earth also had food that was full of vitality like the other world, it would take a long time to reach the Earthwheel level even if one was talented. After walking around the Messier 87 department, Renbachian took all kinds of information and returned to the villa with the Empress. There was no need to care about Earth for the time being. It would be difficult to reach the level that he wanted to see in a short period of time. As for the information, he had to keep it. The research information on cultivation on Earth was also useful to that world. Perhaps he would talk about scientific cultivation in the future? That sounded good. For the next 2 days, the Empress played with her new phone in the villa. She liked this kind of phone that could be wrapped around her wrist like a watch and could also be used as an electronic watch. Xiao, what are you playing? Renbachian came over to look at the screen after cooking and found that it was a game. I think it's called Kings of Glory? Just now, when she was fiddling with her phone, she saw the advertisement for Honor of Kings and was suddenly attracted to the characters in the advertisement. It's time to eat. Renbachian smiled. He wasn't worried that the Empress would be tricked by others in the game and want to exterminate her entire clan. This was because the Empress was definitely the one who would set others up. Be prepared to fight 4 against 5 if you're in the same team as her. After dinner, the two of them sat on the sofa and played Honor of Kings. A few minutes later, 3 people thousands of miles away almost smashed their phones. Encountering one bad teammate was bad enough, let alone 2. Under the night sky, the two of them hid in the brightly lit villa and played tricks on each other, which made them feel very happy. After staying on Earth for a few days, the two of them returned to Daeyo. Renbachian divided the students into 5 groups, assigned them tasks, and got them to enter Tianjing Basin separately. The so-called tasks were to let them use their own eyes to observe the living conditions and social patterns of the remnant citizens of the Han nation, understand their thoughts, and think about how to deal with them. They had never learned these things. Renbachian wanted them to seriously understand the parts of this nation that most people didn't understand and think about it for themselves. Regardless of whether what they saw, thought, and got matched up with Renbachian's ideas, this was a very important part of their lives. Running an educational institute to educate people wasn't just about teaching, but also about educating people. Teacher, we are setting off. The next day, everyone bade farewell to Renbachian at the residence. The tasks that Renbachian arranged for them made them somewhat excited. This was the first time that they left their familiar environment to do something that seemed to have a profound meaning. According to what Renbachian said at that time, what they saw and got would affect the future of tens of millions of people. Be careful, Renbachian couldn't help but say as he looked at the familiar young faces in the courtyard. Although these students were at least at the Manwheel level, there was at least one student in each team who was at the Earthwheel level. With this kind of strength, they should be able to protect themselves. However, Renbachian was still somewhat worried. After all, these were only half-grown children. The oldest was only 18 years old, and the youngest was only 11 years old. Don't worry. If anyone dares to cause trouble, I will twist his head off and kick it like a ball, Du Laolu said as he patted his chest. Don't let anyone twist your head off, someone immediately said with a laugh. Who dares? Have you seen a big fist? Du Laolu raised his fist and threatened. Trash. Little Lolita looked at him sideways with a face full of contempt. It's better to be careful, Rinpoche said faintly. Killing someone doesn't just require a knife. If someone has their eyes on you, they can knock all of you out with a bag of knockout drugs. When that happens, I won't send anyone to save you. I can't afford to lose face. Moreover, even if I wanted to save you, your life and death might not be in your control, and I might not be able to save you. Although Tianjin Basin is also in Dayo, it's different from what you know. The people there are more complicated. Yes, I understand. After hearing what Rinpoche said, everyone became much more serious. Let's set off, Rinpoche said with his hands behind his back as he watched the students leave the courtyard with smiles on their faces. I hope they are safe, Rinpoche said softly as he watched them leave. After all, he had taught these students for a few months and had some feelings for them. Rinpoche didn't want them to return with fewer people. Although he arranged for 2 guards to follow behind each team, it might not be foolproof. After another day, Rinpoche bade farewell to the Empress and left the city. This time, Rinpoche didn't bring too many things. He only brought a pistol, a rifle, a few grenades, and Lin Xiaola, who was sleeping soundly in the carriage. She should be able to guarantee his safety. After all, the people in Tianjin Basin were all remnant citizens of the Hao Nation. Bringing along Aboriginal guards would more or less attract attention and could easily expose his identity. Rinpoche and Lin Xiaola weren't Aboriginals, so it might be less dangerous for the 2 of them to be in Tianjin Basin. However, the biggest problem facing Rinpoche now was how to make the 2 fork-horned cows that were pulling the carriage walk in a straight line. Not long after he left the city, he saw these 2 fellows running into the forest at the side. Stop, stop. Rinpoche whipped the fork-horned cows, and they ran even faster. Chapter 430. The ancients had a good saying, the chariot overturned before the victory was achieved, causing the hero to shed tears. Rinpoche felt that this saying was very true. The ancients were very powerful and always made sense. This was the situation he was in now. Before he could even travel 500 meters out of the city, the chariot overturned, and Rinpoche was covered in grass juice. The 2 stupid oxen were still eating grass indifferently. If he didn't have to rely on them as a means of transportation, he would have eaten beef tonight. Lin Xiaola climbed out of the chariot with sleepy eyes. She turned her head and looked around before asking in confusion, how did the chariot overturn? Don't talk. Lift the chariot back to the road first, Rinpoche said helplessly. Lin Xiaola lifted the chariot with one hand, and Rinpoche dragged the 2 fork-horned cows back to the road before continuing. When are we having dinner? You eat when you wake up and sleep when you are full. Why don't you take a look at how fat you are? Rinpoche said disdainfully. That being said, Lin Xiaola wasn't fat at all. Not only was she not fat, but she was also very thin and weak. She didn't look like other experts who were full of vigor and heroic. No one could tell that she was actually an expert. It doesn't matter if you're fat, Lin Xiaola said indifferently as she rubbed her chest. What are you doing? Rinpoche was amused by her actions. That flat chest of hers was the same regardless of whether she rubbed it or not. Lin Xiaola looked down and said confidently, this is called stepping on breasts. I have it in my memory and it seems to work. You need talent to step on breasts. Without you, what else can you step on? Rinpoche stabbed her in the heart. If I step on it for another 50 years, I will definitely be able to step on it. Lin Xiaola wasn't discouraged at all. Rinpoche was speechless. Your way of calculating time might be different from the average person. When are you going to be an adult? Rinpoche felt a headache when he thought about how she was still underage at the age of 40 or 50. This kind of inhuman lifespan was really enviable. It should be about 50 years, a lifespan that made people envious and jealous. If he sent her to the laboratory, he didn't know if she could be developed to extend her lifespan. He would try to get a bottle of blood next time. Not long after the 2 of them walked forward, the road began to descend. After making a turn, they arrived at a winding mountain road. From their current position to the flat ground at the bottom, there was a distance of 700 to 800 meters. In the distance, there was an endless wilderness, a dense forest, and a city within their field of vision. That was today's destination, the first city after entering Tianjin Basin, Longzhou City. Behind Longzhou City was a winding mountain range. It was said that there was an earth dragon in Tianjin Basin that was coiled up. The dragon's head was facing the outside of Tianjin Basin as if it was going to soar into the sky and pounce toward the north. The saying that obtaining Tianjin Basin was equivalent to obtaining the world wasn't unrelated to this earth dragon. Longzhou City was located at the head of this earth dragon. Of course, this was what the Hao Nation said. The Aboriginals did not pay attention to this. There was a checkpoint at both ends of the winding mountain road. Once these two checkpoints were blocked, more than 10 million remnant citizens of the Hao Nation would be locked in Tianjin Basin. Rinpoche took out his clearance token, and the checkpoint was naturally opened. After exiting the checkpoint, there was an endless plain in front of them. A dirt road extended from the checkpoint all the way to the city in the distance, which was almost invisible at this time. At this time, there were many ox carts coming and going on this road. They were caravans going to and fro Gu City, and Rinpoche and Lin Xiaola weren't conspicuous among them. If there was anything worth noticing, it would be that the other carts going from Gu City to Longzhou City were filled with all kinds of goods, while their cart was empty. From the marks left by the wheels and the sound of the ox cart driving on the road, it could be seen that it was empty. Therefore, Rinpoche didn't try to chat with the merchants next to him as it would be too easy for them to detect something suspicious. Therefore, his attention was focused on the large tracts of farmland on both sides of the road, as well as the farmers who were working in the farmland. Rinpoche noticed that the farming tools used by the farmers were almost all made of stone with wooden handles attached to the ends. Just like outside, a kitchen knife could be regarded as a family heirloom. Iron farming tools were too extravagant for the Aboriginals and the remnant citizens of the Hao Nation. The remnant citizens of the Hao Nation that Rinpoche met previously were mostly merchants. Even though their statuses weren't high, they weren't considered poor either. However, Rinpoche could see a lot of things from these farmers. At the very least, the living conditions of these remnant citizens of the Hao Nation probably weren't very good. Even though these farmers weren't sallow and emaciated, their clothes could be said to be ragged, and their clothes were full of puddings of various sizes. The most important thing was the vitality of these farmers, which gave people the feeling that they were walking corpses and had no vitality at all. Sure enough, you have to see it with your own eyes to know, Rinpoche said softly. There's a red lollipop in your bag. Give me one. I haven't eaten that before, and I have to eat it with my own mouth to know. Lin Xiaola immediately followed up with his words. Be careful of tooth decay. Rinpoche took out a handful of lollipops from his pocket. Lin Xiaola's eyes widened. Here's a red one. Rinpoche took one out and threw it to Lin Xiaola. Stingy. Lin Xiaola watched as Rinpoche put away that handful of lollipops and almost stretched out her claws to scratch him. Lin Xiaola carefully tore off the wrapper of the lollipop and neatly folded it before putting it in her pocket. She had been collecting these things recently. By the way, what are you doing here? She finally remembered to ask about the purpose of her visit. I'm here to check on their situation and see how to make them behave, Rinpoche said as he pointed to the farmers in the farmland. Did they provoke you? I will help you beat them up. Just give me a piece of lollipop for each person I beat up, Lin Xiaola said in astonishment. The next time we start a war with Great Xia, can I just let you out? Rinpoche turned his head to look at this cheap expert and felt like he was closing the door and releasing a dog. I can't beat an army, Lin Xiaola immediately replied. If she were to barge into an army, she might not be able to escape. Even though Great Xia couldn't withstand a single blow from the Aboriginals, it was because they had the winged cavalry, which had thousands of earthwheel experts. If it was just her, she would probably be torn apart by others. We can only bully the farmers. Is there a need for you? Rinpoche squinted his eyes and said with disdain. That's true. Lin Xiaola was still thin-skinned. After thinking about it, she felt that what Rinpoche said made sense and didn't mention it again. When it was close to evening, the two of them finally arrived at Longzhou City along the dirt road. While Rinpoche was waiting for the inspection, he carefully sized up the guards at the lower city gate. They were dressed in leather armor, were generally thin, and had long swords hanging from their waists. Before coming here, he already knew that these swords were all bone swords. Let's see what's in the carriage. When it was their turn, one of the guards came to open the curtain. When he saw that there was only one box inside, his eyes lit up. Normally, when one returned from Goose City, it would be filled with all kinds of items. Since there was only one box, it meant that the items inside were valuable. His heart immediately lit up. Open the box. Renbachien stuffed a handful of silver fragments into his hand. If it's really opened, you won't be able to get these. The guards of Longsho City were very greedy. After all, there were only trade caravans coming and going, and there was only one route. Even if those merchants had complaints, they had no choice but to pass through here. Naturally, the guards would unscrupulously plunder the riches. Renbachien already knew about this before coming here, so he wasn't surprised. Renbachien's words made the expression on the guard's face freeze. Just like what Renbachien said, if there were valuable items in the carriage, even if he asked for more money, they wouldn't belong to him. It was better to accept while he was ahead. This handful of silver fragments was equivalent to a month's worth of riches. Chapter 431. Renbachien sat on the ox cart and looked at the buildings and pedestrians on both sides of the road. It was a completely unfamiliar environment, and he felt like he was on a tour. Most of the buildings in Longsho City were made of wood or pillars. The buildings were dilapidated, and the closer they were to the city gate, the more so. Many children in old clothes or with bare buttocks were running around or biting their dirty fingers while looking at him. Regardless of where one was, rich or poor, children were always full of energy. One could see many more things from the faces of adults. After looking around, Renbachien felt that the ordinary residents weren't doing too well. Whether it was in terms of clothes, complexion, or mental outlook. Their clothes were shabby, and they gave off a numb feeling. They didn't smile much. As he walked deeper into the city, the buildings on both sides of the road were in better condition. There were also some flowers and plants outside the houses on both sides of the road as decorations. Yuelai Inn. Renbachien first saw the word guest, and only saw the name of the inn when he got closer. It was indeed worthy of being the largest inn chain in the martial arts world. It had even opened in Daeyo, another world. Boss, 2 top-class rooms, Renbachien shouted as he walked into the courtyard. This was how it was played on television. What's a good room? The lady boss in front of the counter raised her head, and the moment she opened her mouth, a strong smell came out of her mouth. She was quite pretty. Although her forehead was a little big, she had curved eyebrows and almond-shaped eyes. She looked like she was in her 30s and looked charming. Top-class room, the best room. Renbachien's face fell as he got off to a bad start. Nyo Air, 2 A-class rooms. The lady boss shouted first before smiling at Renbachien and saying, "Customer, your words are quite interesting. Are you from afar?" "Yes, from the Yun Nation." Renbachien nodded. This was his identity this time. He and Lin Xiaola didn't look like the remnant citizens of the Hao Nation, but more like the people of the Yun Nation and Great Xia. "Are you still at war? Was the journey easy?" the lady boss asked. "The road is not easy, and it took a lot of effort. There's an ox cart outside, and I'll rush into the courtyard first." Renbachien went out to bring the ox cart in. The lady boss leaned against the door and watched his movements. Her eyes flickered, and when she saw how he tied the cow to the stable, she was slightly puzzled. The way they tied the rope didn't seem to be done by the people of the Yun Nation. Instead, it seemed to be done by the Aboriginals. The people of the Yun Nation liked to wear Qingyun buckles, while the Aboriginals wore 3-ring buckles on their mounts. Renbachien watched how the guards tied their mounts to the tree every day. Naturally, he was used to their method and didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. When Renbachien looked up at her, she smiled again. "Have we arrived?" When he opened the curtain, she groaned and slowly crawled out as if she didn't have any bones. After she came out, she asked Renbachien to carry her suitcase. Then, the two of them were led by the waiter to their rooms. They were 2 adjacent rooms on the 2nd floor. On the way upstairs, the landlady asked lazily, Is there nothing else in the car? If you lose it, I won't take responsibility. No more. You've brought very little with you. The room was clean. After all, this was Longsho City, the first city after entering the basin. There were many merchants coming and going, and the inns were well maintained. Let's go out for a walk. Renbachien kicked Lin Xiaola, who was paralyzed on the bed the moment she entered the room. Oh! Renbachien expressionlessly took out a lollipop, waved it in front of her, and then threw it at the door. A gust of wind blew past, and she appeared at the door. Sure enough, lollipops weren't omnipotent, but it was impossible not to have lollipops. Renbachien then opened the suitcase, took out a grenade, put it in his money bag, and hung it on his waist. He heard that there were many pickpockets here? Then he locked the suitcase and left the room. Landlady, don't let anyone enter our room, Renbachien said. Don't worry. If anyone enters, I'll break his claws. Not long after Renbachien left, the landlady went upstairs, opened the door, and entered. She took out a wire and poked it twice in the lock. After opening the suitcase, she saw a pile of bullets, a dozen grenades, a rifle, and a few books. She first picked up the books and flipped through them. She realized that the handwriting on them was unrecognizable. She then carefully looked at the grenades and bullets, and finally put them back into the suitcase before locking it. Renbachien brought Lin Xiaola out of the room. With his hands behind his back, he walked toward the center of the city while sizing up the shops on both sides. There were all kinds of cloth shops, salt shops, medicine shops, rice shops, and clothing shops. There were all kinds of things that should be there. People were going in and out of the shops, and it looked very lively. After standing at the side and watching for a while, Renbachien knew what kind of people were going in and out of these shops. Many of them carried a bag or a few bags of things when they came out and placed them on a cart or carried them on a bamboo stick. They didn't look like ordinary people, but more like small vendors in other cities. They bought the things they needed at a low price here and then went to the countryside or small towns to sell them. After walking for a short distance, he smelled a fragrance that filled his nose. He followed the smell and found someone using a stove to roast a fruit that was much bigger than lychees. After roasting for a while, the shell would crack and emit a fragrant smell. How much is it? Renbachien asked. 3 for 1 copper coin. Renbachien turned his head to look at Lin Xiaola, who was beside him. Her saliva was dripping down her neck and into her clothes. Give me 30. Renbachien threw over a tael of silver. The shell was very hot. When the shell was peeled off, the golden flesh was revealed. It tasted a little like a coconut. It was a little chewy, but it tasted pretty good. For the rest of the journey, Lin Xiaola held bag after bag of snacks and couldn't stop eating. Get out of the way, get out of the way. The sound of hooves could be heard. A few people in long robes rode on short horses and galloped across the street, causing a little commotion. Poor they. Renbachien stood by the side of the road and asked a vendor, "Customer, are you from afar?" "They are from the Nine-Blade sect. Don't provoke them and it will be fine." The vendor laughed. "Galloping on a horse in the city, and no one cares?" Renbachien asked. "Don't talk nonsense. The Nine-Blade sect is quite powerful in this area. If someone hears you, be careful not to cause trouble for you," the vendor hurriedly said. "So overbearing?" "I didn't say anything. I just wanted to ask if anyone cares about such a situation." Renbachien raised his eyebrows and threw a tael of silver to the vendor. "Please clear up my doubts. We are from another place, and we need to get a feel of the place first so that we don't provoke people we shouldn't provoke. Customer, you will understand after staying for a while. Many of the city guards are disciples of the Nine-Blade sect, and there are also many people from the Public Order Bureau. As long as there is nothing wrong, naturally no one cares about them," the vendor said softly as he looked around. Renbachien threw another tael of silver over and heard a lot of information from the vendor. Within the boundaries of Longsho City, the most powerful force wasn't the prefecture chief who controlled the 5,000 guards, but a sect called the Golden Ring Residents. It was the biggest sect in the area of Longsho City, Jisai City, and Senyuanli City. Of course, this Golden Ring Residence was only the biggest force in this area. In fact, Longsho City belonged to one of the three biggest forces in this basin. As a result, even though the Golden Ring residence was stronger than the prefecture chief in this area, they didn't dare to provoke the city chief. Of course, the city chief wouldn't provoke them either because the Golden Ring residence wasn't just one sect. Other than these two forces, there were also two smaller sections. One was the Nine Blades sect, and the other was the Jiangshi sect. In addition, there was a local gang called the Death Toad that controlled a group of local ruffians and thieves. They weren't very powerful, and if they were powerful, the prefecture chief of Longsho City wouldn't tolerate them. According to the vendor, even this Death Toad wasn't someone outsiders could provoke. When outside, safety came first, and harmony was the most important. No matter who you met, you just had to lower your head and there was no need to cause trouble. Renbaqian thanked the vendor for his kindness and continued to walk forward with Lin Qiaola. He had a rough idea of the sphere of influence in Longsho City, but he didn't expect such a small city to have so many different forces. Compared to the area where the Aboriginals were, it was really much more chaotic. "Hey, your money bag has been stolen," Lin Qiaola said vaguely as she ate the fruit in her hand. Renbaqian touched the money bag at his waist and found that it was indeed gone. "Do you want me to help you snatch it back?" 5 lollipops. Lin Qiaola's eyes lit up. "There's no need." Renbaqian smiled. They would probably be able to hear the sound of firecrackers in a while. Other people didn't know what the function of a grenade was, but they would definitely pull it when they saw the ring on it. The two of them walked forward for the time it took to drink 2 cups of tea before they heard a loud boom coming from another direction. Chapter 432. In a small alley, more than 10 people were gathered there. The surrounding pedestrians stuck their heads out to take a look, but when they saw the ferocious man glaring at them, they hurriedly lowered their heads and left. "What happened?" A burly man with a full beard and floral embroidery on his body asked in a deep voice. He was wearing a sleeveless jacket and a pleated skirt. Pleated skirts were the traditional clothing of the remnant citizens of the Hao Nation, regardless of gender. "I don't know, we just arrived too." The others shook their heads. They only rushed here after hearing the noise. "Who's dead?" The corpses scattered in the alley were no longer recognizable. They were like rags, and some of their limbs were nowhere to be found. "It's Two-Headed Snake. I saw him come in just now," a 15 or 16-year-old youth said from not far away. "He went to the streets to work just now. He should have succeeded, but I don't know how he became like this." The youth looked a little fearful. Although he was young, he had seen many life and death situations. Last month, there was a man about his age who stole from the father of a Nine Blades sect disciple. In the end, he was tied to a horse and dragged to death outside the city. He saw it with his own eyes. Logically speaking, he should be used to seeing dead people and shouldn't show such an expression. The reason why he showed such an expression was because he could see clearly that no one had entered the alley. Just now, he secretly followed behind the Two-Headed Snake to see if he had obtained anything good. He didn't expect to hear a thunderous sound coming from inside the alley as soon as he reached the mouth of the alley. Then he saw the corpse. There was a strange smell in the air. From the beginning to the end, he didn't see anyone else. Subsequently, he told everyone about what he saw. Everyone was puzzled. Since no one else appeared, how did Two-Headed Snake die? "Look at the wall." Someone suddenly pointed at the wall and shouted. There were many small holes in the surrounding wall. Because of the explosion of the grenade, the wall was slightly damaged. The traces of these fragments entering the wall were not easy to be discovered. Very quickly, everyone dug out some fragments from the wall. However, everyone still couldn't figure out what exactly happened. This was because grenades were beyond their knowledge. "Check if there are any suspicious people in the city," the burly man said. They had to figure out what exactly happened first. At this moment, Renbaqian was eating noodles. After staying in Dayo for so long, he could finally eat noodles. There was a small restaurant by the street. When he entered, he saw 2 people eating noodles there. Renbaqian pointed in their direction and said, "Give me a portion as well." The noodles were not very delicious. They were sour and spicy, and the taste was a little strange. However, he was satisfied to be able to eat noodles in this place. On the way back, Lin Xiaola suddenly stretched out her hand at lightning speed and grabbed the hand of a young man in his 20s. Her eyes were blazing. She could tolerate stealing Rinpoche's wallet, but she absolutely couldn't tolerate stealing his bag of sweets. She had been eyeing it for a long time, but he actually dared to stretch his claws out? Ouch, ouch, it's broken. The young man behind Rinpoche had a pained look on his face as Lin Xiaola grabbed his wrist. His eyes darted left and right as he tried to find a way to escape. He stole from you. Lin Xiaola frowned. Although she had caught him, she didn't know how to deal with him. She spent most of her time in Qingxin Palace Hall. The 2 times she came out, she followed Rinpoche. Now that she encountered such a situation, she didn't know what to do. Rinpoche grabbed the young man's clothes and dragged him into a nearby alley. How do you think I should deal with you? Should I break your hand or your leg? Rinpoche asked calmly as he pressed the young man against the wall. He wasn't going to cause trouble this time around. He was only going to investigate, but that didn't mean that he could tolerate anything. After stealing a money bag, he still wanted to steal a bag of sweets? Moreover, he even wanted to fleece a sheep? Do you think I'm easy to bully? In any case, I'm a man-will expert. Are you from another place? Let me tell you, I'm from the Death Toad. You'd better let me go, and I definitely won't find trouble with you. Otherwise, we have 800 brothers. No matter how good the 2 of you are, you won't be able to walk out of Longsho City. The young man rolled his eyes and revealed a ferocious expression. In his line of work, one had to have good eyesight. Otherwise, if he provoked someone he shouldn't provoke, he wouldn't even be able to keep his life. From the moment the 2 of them left the restaurant, he had been watching them. With one look, he could tell that they weren't locals. Outsiders were unfamiliar with this place. Generally, it was better to have one less thing to do. Therefore, the moment he opened his mouth, he scared the 2 of them. 800 brothers? So scary. Rinpoche smiled faintly as he held the other party's hand. This hand is quite beautiful. One look and I can tell that you didn't do much work. There aren't even any calluses. It's rare for a man to have such a hand. Looking at Rinpoche's expression, the young man immediately felt that he was in trouble. Snap. The young man's index finger was pressed against the back of his hand. The young man let out the miserable howl. This looks much more pleasing to the eye. Rinpoche lowered his head and looked at the young man who was bending over and holding his finger as he howled miserably. Next time, watch your eyes more carefully, Rinpoche said and walked out of the alley unhurriedly. That's it. Lin Xiaola followed beside Rinpoche and asked softly, "What else can I do?" Rinpoche asked. After all, he wasn't here to stir up trouble. Punishing without teaching is called torture. I saw this in the ancient books. Lin Xiaola was puzzled. Rinpoche turned his head and looked at her as if she was an alien. But, is there something wrong with the ancient books? Lin Xiaola asked doubtfully. You are right. Rinpoche agreed. Let's go back. He brought Lin Xiaola back to the vicinity of the alley and happened to see that person walking out. When he saw the 2 of them, he immediately shuddered. Rinpoche grabbed his chest and pulled him back into the alley. Sir, you're a magnanimous person. Don't lower yourself to my level. The young man was scared out of his wits when he saw the 2 of them. He quickly begged for mercy and didn't forget to wave his fingers in front of Rinpoche. Do you know what you did wrong? Rinpoche asked. I know, I was blind and offended the 2 of you. I won't dare to do it again. The young man quickly begged for mercy. If you make a mistake, you'll be punished. If you get beaten, you'll have to stand up straight. It's hard to break an earthen jar without leaving the well. You'll have to pay for what you've done sooner or later. Tell me, of all the things you could have done at your age, why did you come out to steal? If he was caught, wouldn't he be beaten to death if he met a ruthless person? Not everyone is as easy to talk to as me. The young man scowled. Was the person in front of him crazy? He had already left, yet he still came back to teach him a lesson? Moreover, this was breaking one of his fingers. Do you have some misunderstanding about the word easy to talk to? He was either talkative or easy to talk to. Can you let me go and let me go to the medicine shop to take a look at my finger? I still have to rely on this finger to eat. Are you convinced by what I said? Rinpoche's saliva flew all over the place before he finally asked this question. I accept. I will turn over a new leaf when I go back, the young man scowled. Come, let me take a look at your finger. This one is broken. How did it become like this? It's not symmetrical. Rinpoche grabbed the young man's hand, and the young man suddenly trembled in fear. Along with the crisp sound of bones breaking, the middle finger was also attached to the back of his hand. Punishing without teaching is called abuse. I taught without punishing and spared your life. Rinpoche let go of the young man, feeling very satisfied. Teaching without punishing means that evil people won't be punished. Lin Xiaola added. The young man's face turned green when he heard this. Must the two of you kill me? How could this little girl be so ruthless? Forget it. It's fine as long as you taught him. Let's not kill him. He's just trying to make a living. Who would do this if they could do something else? It's not easy for him. Rinpoche looked kind. Oh. Lin Xiaola nodded. After the two of them left, the young man looked at his two fingers that were attached to the back of his hand with a pale face. Mother f***, I met a lunatic. I wonder if these two fingers can be reattached. The young man's hands were wrapped in cloth as he dragged his legs home. He was really unlucky today and didn't know if he could take revenge. Street crossing rat, how did you end up like this? Not long after he returned to his shabby house, a young man came looking for him. Don't mention it. When this matter was brought up, he was covered in snot and tears. Although it was common for him to be beaten up when he was caught as a thief, today's incident made him feel aggrieved. Were these two crazy people? Did you see any strange people in the city? That person asked when he saw that the young man didn't want to talk about it. Half Mountain Flower instructed us to report any suspicious or strange strangers. Half Mountain Flower was the boss of this area and was in charge of more than 20 pickpockets. Street Crossing Rat's eyes lit up when he heard this. Weren't these two strangers today? Furthermore, they were two crazy people. He could finally take revenge. One had to know that Half Mountain Flower was a man-will expert, and his leader was even an earth-will expert. Although these two people had some martial arts, at their age, how good could their martial arts be? He didn't believe that they would be able to get away with their leader. In his heart, an earth-will expert was already the most powerful person. He could even go to a brothel with two little girls, one in front and the other pushing him from the back. Also, that little girl was so beautiful, but her heart was actually so ruthless. He didn't know how the leader would deal with her. Chapter 433. At night at the Uli Inn. His son was preparing to close for the day. Although the city gates were open all night, there was basically no one around at this time. When he closed the door and turned around, he felt that his eyes were blurry and quickly rubbed them. There was clearly no one in the lobby just now, but now there was a burly man standing in front of the counter. "Bee Sting, are there any suspicious strangers?" The burly man had a square face, thick eyebrows and big eyes. He was considered dignified and tall. Although he was not as tall as the Aboriginals, he was slightly taller than the ordinary remnant citizens of the Hao Nation. "Hey, if it isn't Owner Lin. Why are you here today?" The lady boss saw the man in front of her and immediately put on a smile. At the same time, she was thinking, is this fellow looking for strangers? Who is he looking for? The two people upstairs? No matter where there was light, there would be darkness. There would always be places where light couldn't reach. There was only one underground force in Longsho City, the Death Toad. The man in front of her was called Lin Yuan, the deputy chief of the Death Toad. It was said that he was much more powerful than the chief. However, his life had been saved by the chief, and he had always been the deputy. Even though he was more powerful than the Death Toad, he had not been disloyal and was considered a trustworthy person. In Longsho City, he could be considered a well-known figure. Although the Death Toad gang had gathered a group of ruffians, which made people look down on them, the Death Toad and Lin Yuan's martial arts were solid. Even the Nine Blades sect would not provoke them. I'll leave after asking a few questions. You, Bee Sting, are really free and unfettered in such a place. I'm afraid that the people below don't understand etiquette, so I came to ask them personally, Lin Yuan said in a deep voice. Oh, it can't be a small matter to trouble owner Lin, right? I don't know why you're making such a fuss, the lady boss said softly as she leaned against the counter. Just tell me if there are any. A man and a woman, and they are both young, Lin Yuan said in a deep voice. You know my rules. The lady boss glanced at the second floor and rolled her eyes. I understand. Thank you. Lin Yuan cupped his fists. He understood what Bi Sting meant. Her rules were that no one could cause trouble in the store. No one could touch her customers in the store. What's his background? Lin Yuan lowered his voice. If you can make me feel that you're stronger than that dead man of mine, I'll tell you everything. The lady boss moved her body and sat on the bar counter. She placed a hand on Lin Yuan's shoulder and said softly. Lin Yuan took a step back and said, You must be joking. Be needle, jade knife, I can't afford to provoke the two of you. Are you looking down on me because I'm getting old? The lady boss said faintly, her eyes moving about, seducing one's soul. Lin Yuan's heart skipped a beat, but he quickly suppressed it. The green snake's mouth, the wasp's stinger. From the name of the flower, one could tell who she was. Those who wanted to get intimate with her but ended up losing their lives were like carps crossing the river. It was said that a young master from a city lord's family in the north had died. He had been skinned alive. His skin had been peeled off, stuffed with straw, and the meat had been made into buns. After that, she was exposed, so she had no choice but to escape here. After she escaped, it was said that dozens of puppets made of human skin stuffed with straw were found. Therefore, she also had a flower name, Pai Weng. Look at your guts. The lady boss stretched out her finger and drew a circle in front of him. Although I'm gutsy, I know what I can touch and what I can't. Lin Yuan squeezed out a smile. The lady boss grabbed his clothes and pulled him in front of her. She blew into his ear and whispered, They said they are merchants from the Yun nation. However, I didn't see any goods, thank you. Lin Yuan quickly took a few steps back, cupped his hands at her, and disappeared into the night. The lady boss looked at his disappearing figure and sneered. It would be a good thing if someone could help her find out what was going on. Ren Baqin naturally didn't know that he had been targeted as soon as he arrived in Longzhou City. Furthermore, it wasn't just one group of people. Previously, he had repeatedly exhorted the students not to get into trouble. He didn't expect that nothing would happen to the students, but he himself would be targeted. The night passed. The next morning, when he opened the door, a fragrant body threw itself into his arms. Ah! A soft and seductive cry of surprise sounded. Ren Baqin quickly raised his hands to block the other party and grabbed a couple of handfuls. It felt pretty good. Are you all right? Ren Baqin pretended that he didn't notice anything as he helped the lady who threw herself into his arms. I wanted to ask if you wanted breakfast. I didn't expect to slip and bump into you. The lady boss's face was flushed, and she pushed her chest forward. When she stood up, she gently brushed her hands over Ren Baqin's body. Ren Baqin savored the feeling, and his expression didn't change at all. It's good that you're all right. Prepare breakfast for 2 more. After sending the lady boss off, Ren Baqin squinted his eyes. It was such a coincidence that she bumped into him as soon as he opened the door. Longzhou City wasn't big, but there were many demons and monsters. It was much more interesting to come out than to stay in the palace. There was more of a Jianghu flavor. Staying in the palace or beside the empress wasn't as exciting. The Jianghu was a place that all men yearned for. It was full of coquettish young married women, unmarried heroines, and cross-dressing beggars. As his mind wandered, he walked to the room next door and pushed the door open. Lin Xiaola was sprawled out on the bed, drooling. She was wearing a thin white tube top and shorts that were almost sticking to her body. Ren Baqin confirmed that her flat figure wasn't as developed as his chest muscles. This was such a sad story. Wake up, the sun is shining on your butt. Ren Baqin stood by the bed and shouted. There was no response. It's time to eat. Oh, where? Lin Xiaola immediately sat up with hazy eyes. Put on your clothes, let's go downstairs to eat. After eating, Ren Baqin put 2 grenades in his pocket and continued to walk around with Lin Xiaola. Along the way, he bought a money bag, stuffed a grenade into it, and hung the money bag on his waist. The two of them walked around for the whole morning from the north to the south of the city. Along the way, they inquired about their group of students. After all, with so many Aboriginal youths, it was quite conspicuous and easy to find out about them. When he entered the city yesterday, they were still in the city and had only left the city this morning. At the same time, 5 disciples of the Nine Blades sect rode into the city ostentatiously on short horses. "Let's drink and rest first. We will go to work in the afternoon," one of the youths said to everyone. One of the young men said to the crowd. Everyone immediately responded and shouted, "Xiaoyuan, you should be the one paying for this drink." "No problem." That youth smiled and led everyone into a restaurant by the roadside. After everyone had eaten and drunk their fill, the youth brushed past someone as he walked down the stairs. There was a slip of paper in his hand. He took a glance at the note when no one was paying attention and immediately understood. Not long after Ren Baqian and Lin Xiaola left the restaurant, they saw the crowd in front of them becoming a little chaotic as they moved to both sides. There was the sound of hurried hooves as 5 disciples of the Nine Blades sect galloped along the road while shouting, "Make way, make way." Ren Baqian and Lin Xiaola stood by the roadside indifferently and waited for the horses to pass. He didn't expect one of the horses to charge toward them. The youth on the horse shouted, "The horse is out of control. Make way, make way." Chapter 434. "He did it on purpose," Lin Xiaola replied quickly. Ren Baqian felt that something was amiss even without Lin Xiaola's reminder. It was too much of a coincidence that so many people were charging at them, just like in the morning. Kill the horse and leave the person behind. While they were talking, the horse was only 3 meters away from Ren Baqian. Ren Baqian could feel the wind from the galloping horse on his face. A small figure appeared in front of Ren Baqian, raised its paw, and slapped at the horse. The surrounding people immediately exclaimed. Although the dwarf horse wasn't tall, it was strong and could kill a person. Lin Xiaola, who was in front of Ren Baqian, looked thin and weak. It was as if a gust of wind could blow her away, let alone being hit by a horse. Everyone could almost see the scene of her being hit by the horse. Thump! As Lin Xiaola slapped the horse's head with her delicate palm, the horse fell to the ground as if it had hit a wall. The person on the horse also flew into the air and barely managed to twist his body in midair before falling into the shop next door. When the other riders saw the situation, they immediately surrounded the shop. One of them shouted toward the shop, "Xiaoyuan? Is something the matter?" After realizing that the horse was dead, someone shouted angrily at Lin Xiaola, "Although it's Yuan's fault for losing control of the horse, don't you think you've gone too far?" They clearly saw how Lin Xiaola killed the horse with one slap. To kill a galloping horse with one slap, one needed to be at least at the man-wheel level. However, to make the galloping horse stop moving as if it had hit a wall without moving at all was something that even their master couldn't do. Although this horse was a dwarf horse, it weighed 250 kilograms. Coupled with the impact of the galloping horse, even an intermediate man-wheel expert couldn't remain motionless. This girl, who looked much younger than them, was actually so highly skilled. This made them speak more politely to her. However, they weren't alone. There was still the Nine Blades sect behind them, so they had to demand an explanation no matter what. "He was the one who hit me." After hearing her reply, Ren Baqian raised his head and said faintly, "My servant girl was afraid that he would hit me, so she used a little more force." "You are the servant girl. You are the servant girl." Lin Xiaola was immediately unhappy when she heard that. "If I'm not a servant girl, then what am I?" Ren Baqian asked. "Bodyguard." Lin Xiaola was very firm about her identity. "A maid or a bodyguard?" Ren Baqian held a lollipop in his hand. Lin Xiaola hesitated for a moment, but she still didn't give in. "Bodyguard." There was another one in Ren Baqian's hands. "Servant girl it is." Lin Xiaola smiled and grabbed the lollipop. The rest of the people watched him coax the child with a lollipop. It was hard to imagine that this girl, who could be easily bribed, was actually so skilled. "Sir, although I'm also at fault in this matter, don't you think you're going a little overboard? With your skills, you clearly could have dodged it, yet you wanted to kill my horse." Isn't this inexcusable? We are disciples of the Nine-Blades sect. Although we aren't a big sect, we can't let people bully us like this, the young man named Xiaoyuan said as he walked out of the shop with a dejected expression. Speaking of which, I still want to ask you, why did it have to bump into us on such a wide road? Rinpoche squinted his eyes and looked over. Naturally, the horse went out of control. This isn't something I can control. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened. The young man's eyes flickered. What a coincidence! Rinpoche laughed mischievously. Why don't the two of you leave your names? It will be easier for us to explain today's incident when we return. After all, horses are precious. This horse belongs to the sect and is very valuable, the young man said. Names? Even if I tell you, you won't know. We are not from here and are not here to cause trouble. This thing is for you as compensation. Rinpoche took out a dark green ball and threw it to the young man. What's this? The young man took it and looked at it carefully. It was a dark green ball with a raised lattice, a ring, and a metal strip. Good stuff. Its value is much higher than your horse's. As for its use, I can't tell you. After all, this thing isn't something you should have. Rinpoche laughed, ignored them, and left with Lin Xiaola. Seniors, let them go. The young man held the ball in his hand and said, That horse. One of them was somewhat unwilling. After all, a dwarf horse was considered precious to them. If they let them go just like that, they wouldn't be able to explain themselves when they returned. The five of them only had enough pocket money to buy one horse for a year. He's an expert. Go back and tell Master about this matter. I believe he won't blame us. After all, the horse that I was riding on went out of control. If there's any responsibility, I will bear it alone. There's no need to trouble senior brothers. The young man squeezed out a smile. After hearing what he said, everyone stopped talking. However, they were somewhat embarrassed. After all, they were from the same sect. What did he give you? Someone asked curiously. This ball looks quite exquisite. I wonder what it's used for. What's this metal strip? It looks like it's holding a handle. There's a ring? Pull it and see. Maybe it can open. The few of them gathered around to look at the ball that Rinpoche gave them. After all, even a bodyguard was such an expert. She was so young and pretty, although a little flat. Presumably, the identity of such a person wasn't ordinary. What he gave them wouldn't be ordinary either. Did you pull the ring down? Did you damage it? Let's see if we can open it. Maybe there's something inside. Boom. Hearing the explosion coming from behind, Rinpoche couldn't help but say, Curiosity killed the cat. What did you give them? Lin Xiaola couldn't help but ask. If there were guards here, they would definitely know what Rinpoche gave them. However, she had been sleeping in the city and naturally didn't recognize a grenade. It's just a small thing. Punishing without teaching is torture. Lin Xiaola reiterated. There's no chance to punish them even if I wanted to, Rinpoche replied. Then, he thought for a while and said, It seems like we're being targeted. Forget it. We have a rough idea of the situation here. Now that something like this has happened, we can't stay here anymore. Let's go to other cities to take a look. After all, it was an entrance city. It was too close to Gu City and couldn't come into contact with too many things. If he wanted to see more, he had to go deeper. Sir, why are you in such a hurry to leave? If we set off now, I'm afraid we will have to spend the night on the road. When the lady boss heard that Rinpoche wanted to check out, she was a little surprised. She didn't know what he had encountered outside. The public security here isn't very good. It's not suitable for me to stay. Rinpoche smiled. How can that be? The lady boss was even more surprised. Longzhou City's public security is famous. After all, there are so many merchants coming and going. If the public security wasn't good, there would have been chaos. Maybe the public security here has worsened after I came here, Rinpoche thought to himself, but didn't say it out loud. An hour later, the two of them sat in an ox cart and left the south gate. It's confirmed that it's him. Should we chase after him? A few people stood at the city gate and looked at the ox cart in front. Everyone else looked at the two people in front. Brother Lin, what do you think? The man at the front asked. There's no need to provoke him. That girl is at least an earthwill expert. With such skills at such a young age, her background isn't simple, Lin Yuan said in a deep voice. It wasn't wise to provoke such a person just because of a subordinate's interference. Furthermore, even if we don't chase after him, the Nine Blades sect won't let this matter rest, Lin Yuan added. Speaking of this matter, the man at the side felt a little distressed. After all, it wasn't easy to send a disciple into the Nine Blades sect. After so many years, he had only sent 2 disciples in, and now one of them had died. Let's wait for the Nine Blades sect to catch up and see what happens, the man at the front said. After all, this is Tianjing Basin, not the Yun Nation. These 2 guys were so ostentatious and injured someone. Yet they still want to leave. They are looking down on us. Lin Yuan remained silent. Looking up to him and looking down on him? That was a lie. The man in front was probably thinking about the Nine Blades sect. After all, with such skills at such a young age, he definitely wasn't an ordinary person. He probably had a family or sect behind him. If they died here, the Nine Blades sect would probably be the first place the other party would look for. The Nine Blades sect had become more and more overbearing in recent years. It would be reassuring if 2 of those old fellows from the Nine Blades sect died. Just for this reason alone, it was worth interfering. Chapter 435. It was already afternoon when they left the city. They didn't walk too far before the sky turned dark. It wasn't easy for him to find a forest. He parked the ox cart by the roadside and came back with some firewood. The roars of wild beasts could be heard in the forest. From time to time, they could also hear some rustling in the underbrush, but they couldn't see anything. There are only steamed buns left. Renbachian took out some steamed buns from the carriage. These were taken from the hotel. After all, they were in a hurry to leave, and it was good enough to have steamed buns to eat. Renbachian sprinkled some salt and chili on the steamed buns until they were slightly charred. The taste was pretty good. A spicy sauce would be even better. After eating the steamed buns, the 2 of them lay on the grass and looked up at the sky, the mosquitoes buzzing in their ears. Slap. Renbachian gave himself a slap and perished together with a large mosquito. Why is it only me? Renbachian felt that something was amiss. Lin Xiaola wasn't affected at all, but those mosquitoes were moving toward him. Who? Renbachian turned his head to look and saw a mosquito land on her face. Its proboscis pierced into her face, but it was as if it had pierced into a steel plate. The moment it came into contact with her face, the proboscis broke, and the remaining mosquito flew into the air with an aggrieved look on its face. His skin was so thick that it made others envious and jealous. Renbachian sighed and continued to lie there and look at the sky. The night sky of this world was filled with stars and was extremely beautiful. On Earth, he could see the beautiful night sky when he was young, but he couldn't see it anymore after he grew up. The dark sky hangs low accompanied by a sea of bright stars. The insects fly, the insects are flying. Renbachian smacked his lips and couldn't continue singing. He was already a mosquito. Mosquitoes fly, mosquitoes fly. The sound of horses galloping in the distance broke the silence of the night. Renbachian felt that he might have something to do if he traveled at night on a fast horse. In the afternoon, he knew that someone would definitely chase after him, but it was a little slower than he expected. Wake up, there's work to do. I'll do it when I wake up, Lin Xiaola said in a daze. I can wait, but they probably can't. While the 2 of them were talking, the sound of horse hooves got closer. There were at least 6 or 7 horses. There's fire. There's someone in front. Based on the route, it's most likely them. Be careful. The few people on horseback saw the fire in the distance and immediately became spirited. They hurried and finally caught up. The other party had actually killed a few disciples of the Nine Blades sect in Longzhou City. No matter what, they could not let him off. The sound of the horses' hooves stopped outside the range of the firelight. In the dark, they saw 2 people lying not far from the bonfire and immediately knew that they had found their targets. Sirs, I don't know how my Nine Blades sect's disciples offended the 2 of you for you to use such a vicious method. Out of 5 of them, only 1 survived. Furthermore, he was seriously injured. In the future, even if he were to be cured, he would be crippled. Aren't the methods of the two of you too vicious? Do you think you can just leave after killing someone? 6 people walked out of the dark night. The first 2 were in their 50s or 60s, while the other 4 were in their 30s or 40s. They all had a capable aura about them. They are too ugly, Renbachian said without hesitation. Although the other party had provoked him first, the Nine Blades sect was just a small sect in Renbachian's eyes. On the other hand, he was a member of the palace and was a secondary class, rank 4 official. If he wasn't out on a mission this time, he could simply transfer a team of guards to destroy the entire Nine Blades sect. With such a huge gap, he naturally couldn't be bothered to explain to the people of the Nine Blades sect. Furthermore, there was no need to explain. Was he supposed to say that the other party had deliberately offended him and reason with them? Renbachian couldn't be bothered to do such a thing. The people of the Nine Blades sect had come with anger. The reason why they didn't make a move was because they saw the corpse of the horse and knew that the girl was an expert. Upon hearing Renbachian's words, they were even more furious. If they let the two of them go, the Nine Blades sect would no longer be able to show its face in the future. Since you said so, there's no need to say anything more. Capture them and wait for the sect master to deal with them. One of them laughed angrily and didn't say anything else. He leaped into the air and pounced toward the 2 people. The others also surrounded them. Renbachian lay on the ground, held his pistol, and fired 3 consecutive shots at the figure in the air. After 3 consecutive gunshots, the person changed his position in the air and shouted, "Trying to hurt me with mere concealed weapons? You are looking down on the Nine Blades sect." Along with this voice, a lotus flower formed by snow-white blade gleams bloomed in the air. When the person in the air saw that the 2 of them did not move, he relaxed. He thought to himself that the 2 of them were still young and had not seen much of the world. That young girl could kill a horse and was quite strong. However, when faced with a life-and-death battle, she was stunned. After capturing the 2 of them, he wanted to let them know that this was Tianjin Basin, not the Yun Nation. Not everyone could be arrogant and despotic here. The lives of those disciples would be repaid by the 2 of them with their lives. That girl would first pose in 18 positions to satisfy her craving before killing them to pay with her life. The eyes of the people surrounding them lit up when they saw the snow-white lotus flower in the air. This move was called 7th Blade. The Nine Blades sect's name wasn't because of the 9 blades, but because of the 9 moves. Each move was extremely powerful, and the later the moves, the more powerful they were. No one had mastered 9th Blade for many years, and only the sect leader had mastered 8th Blade. This move was the strongest move after 7th Blade. This elder used the strongest move from the start, and it was obvious that he was determined to win. Just as all kinds of thoughts were running through everyone's minds, a figure suddenly bounced up from the ground and rushed in front of him at a faster speed. The body twisted a few times in the air and passed through the saber light. Before he could react, a claw slashed at his face, and then another. That person's face was covered with 10 bloody marks, and his entire face was beyond recognition. He screamed and fell from the air. This unforeseen event shocked the people surrounding them. One had to know that the person who fell was an intermediate earth wheel expert, yet he was actually defeated in 1 round. Spirit wheel. A hoarse voice with a slight tremble could be heard. Everyone was shocked. Spirit wheel expert? One had to know that a spirit wheel expert was definitely an expert among experts no matter where he was. If he were to become an official in Great Xia, he would at least be a rank 4 official. Most of the practitioners had probably never seen a spirit wheel expert in their entire lives. Now, this little girl was actually a spirit wheel expert? They were actually going to make a move against a spirit wheel expert? Thinking about what they were about to do, everyone suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. There was nothing worse than being an enemy of a spirit wheel expert. If there was, it would be what they were preparing to do. They were preparing to make a move against a spirit wheel expert. It was simply putting their necks on the edge of a knife. No one doubted the words of that voice because it belonged to another elder who was also an earth wheel expert. This time, the Nine Blades sect had sent 2 Earthwheel experts to capture the 2 of them. One had to know that the Nine Blades sect only had a total of 5 Earthwheel experts and was already the largest sect in Longsho City. Earthwheel experts could already do whatever they wanted in most places. However, they didn't expect to encounter an even more tyrannical person this time. She was actually a spirit will expert? Lin Xiaola landed on the ground, licked her paws, and frowned. It seemed that the taste of blood wasn't that good. Be careful of diarrhea. Rinpochen saw her actions and couldn't help but say, "Don't you find it dirty to lick the blood of any Tom, Dick, or Harry?" Lin Xiaola immediately rubbed her paws on her body. If they were previously judged as a Tom, Dick, or Harry, the people from the Nine Blades sect would definitely fight to the death with the other party. However, after knowing that the other party was a spirit wheel expert, all these thoughts disappeared. Now, they were thinking about how to leave this place alive. Chapter 436. How should we deal with them? Lin Xiaola wiped the blood off her claws, ignored them, and turned to look at Rinpochen. Rinpochen looked at the people around him. It was as if they were frozen in place and didn't dare to move. The man on the ground also stopped screaming for fear that his voice would attract Lin Xiaola's attention. With just one move, Lin Xiaola had only used one move, and the few people who had come with a menacing aura were trembling like quails, not daring to move at all. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts when they heard Lin Xiaola's words. They were afraid that the man would say, "Kill them." In the face of a spirit wheel expert, they didn't even have the chance to escape. There was no need to make a move. Just the title of a spirit wheel expert was enough to frighten them. "Sir, if there's anything I can do for you, I'll be at your beck and call." "I'll definitely do it properly," a man suddenly said. "Leave this one. As for the others..." Rinpochen pointed at the man and muttered to himself. The first person who spoke was pretty good and had quick reflexes. Rinpochen was indeed lacking someone to follow him around. It didn't matter to him whether the others were killed or not. As long as most of the commoners were left behind, he didn't care about the lives of these practitioners. After he finished speaking, the first person immediately heaved a sigh of relief. "The night is long, and I'm not in the mood to sleep. Let's play rock, paper, scissors. Those who win can leave, and those who lose. The scenery here isn't bad, and it's a good place to be buried. There are mountains on one side and water on the other, so you won't be lonely in the future," Rinpochen said after a slight pause. Upon hearing this, everyone felt a chill in their hearts. Not only did they encounter a spirit wheel expert, but there was also a person who didn't follow common sense and acted based on his preferences. No matter who it was, they were afraid of meeting such a person who didn't follow common sense, especially when there was a spirit wheel expert by his side. "Sir, we were blind. Please let us live. As long as you have any instructions in the future, we won't say a word," another Earthwheel expert said while suppressing his fear. At the same time, he cursed his dead disciples. If it weren't for them, he wouldn't have encountered such a situation. "Please let us go. We were blind." The others also begged for mercy. "I didn't want to cause trouble, but you guys chased after me. Don't blame me. I've already given you a chance." Rinpochen was halfway through his sentence when a gust of wind blew past him. Lin Xiaola was gone. Rinpochen looked at the empty spot next to Lin Xiaola, who was originally standing beside him. Then, he looked at the few man-wheel experts and 2 earth-wheel experts around him and felt that he had been F***ed. That simple-minded person actually abandoned her and disappeared. Under such circumstances, the remnant citizens of the Hao nation naturally had many tricks up their sleeves. Shi Wanya, the Protectorate of the South's Protectorate of the South, would seize the slightest hint of this situation and kill everyone. This made even more people resentful, and some people were worried that the Aboriginals would come in one day and kill everyone. Under such worries, they wanted to leave this basin even more and control their lives in their own hands. At this moment, when they heard Rinpochen say what they were most worried about, everyone couldn't care less about anything else. "How did Sir know?" An earth wheel expert hurriedly asked. Right now, he couldn't care less about the other party and escape. One had to know that Rinpoche's words involved all the people in Tianjin Basin, even if they had families. That's why I'm here, Rinpoche said faintly. Everyone wanted to ask more questions, but a figure suddenly appeared among them. Lin Xiaola was standing there, carrying 2 people in her hands. Seeing that Lin Xiaola had returned, Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief. Even though it had only been 2 minutes, it was enough for him to die several times over. However, now wasn't the time to talk about this. Who is this? They were peeping in the forest just now. Lin Xiaola threw the 2 people to the ground. Their faces were scratched one after another. Lin Xiaola raised her head and looked at Rinpoche with hopeful eyes, as if she was asking for credit and a reward. Rinpoche was exasperated that she didn't live up to his expectations. She threw him aside and ran to catch people? You have to remember your identity. You are a bodyguard, a bodyguard, a bodyguard. If there weren't outsiders around, he would have taught her what a bodyguard was. Dead Toad? Lin Yuan? Those people from the 9 Blades sect exclaimed when they saw the 2 of them. You can even recognize this? Rinpoche looked down and saw that the 2 people were beyond recognition. Why did Lin Xiaola love scratching people's faces so much? Chapter 437. Death Toad? Is it that gang from Longsho City? Rinpoche had heard of the Death Toad when he was in Longsho City, so he immediately thought of it when he heard the name. He didn't know why these 2 people followed him here. Yes, these 2 are the chief and deputy chief of the Death Toad. Sir, what you said just now was a lie, right? A trembling voice asked. Normally, the people from the 9 Blades sect would definitely want to know why these 2 people were following them. However, they were more concerned about what Rinpoche said just now. One had to know that what Rinpoche said just now was simply too important to them. If Dayo really wanted to use their troops in Tianjin Basin, they were afraid that blood would flow in this cage eventually. Other than a few experts who could escape by climbing over the surrounding mountains and cliffs, the rest had nowhere to run. Now, they only hoped that Rinpoche was lying to them and completely threw aside the fact that Rinpoche wanted to take their lives just now. Lie to you? Is there a need for me to do that? Rinpoche sneered. Tianjin Basin was now like psoriasis to Dayo. If one day, the Empress no longer cared about the original agreement and wanted to slaughter these remnant citizens of the Hao Nation, he reckoned that the entire imperial court would raise their hands in approval. Dayo had never learned how to appease people, and it had never been a country that paid attention to etiquette and benevolence. To them, killing was the most convenient thing. Hearing what Rinpoche said, the people from the 9 Blades sect were speechless and had an ugly look on their faces. Sir, you are here for... Just now, Rinpoche had said that he was here for this matter. Furthermore, with a spirit wheel expert by his side, it increased the persuasiveness of his words. I am here for this matter. Consider it as giving you a chance to live, Rinpoche said faintly. If he didn't make this trip, the lives of these remnant citizens of the Hao Nation would depend on the Empress's mood. However, in his eyes, these remnant citizens of the Hao Nation were still somewhat useful. After all, the Aboriginals were too boorish, and their brains were filled with muscles. A country couldn't only know how to fight wars. If he wanted to use some other people, these remnant citizens of the Hao Nation would be a better choice. After all, even if the Yun Nation was conquered in the future, the resistance of the people of the Yun Nation that had just been conquered would probably be even more intense. In contrast, these remnant citizens of the Hao Nation had been under the rule of Dayo for so many years, and the rule of the Aboriginals was deeply ingrained in their bones. This could be seen from the fact that they only dared to make small moves in private and didn't dare to rise up in revolt. Therefore, these remnant citizens of the Hao Nation were more useful. Originally, the life and death of these people didn't matter to him, but after seeing their reactions after listening to his words, he changed his mind. It would be better to reveal his identity and make those who were obedient stay behind. With them at his beck and call, he would be able to avoid a lot of trouble during his trip to Tianjin Basin. At the very least, there wouldn't be another incident like what happened in Longsho City. If they did well, it would be fine to keep them. In any case, he would definitely need people. So it turns out that Milord has come for this matter. We were rash before. I hope Milord does not take offense. Renbachien nodded slightly. These words were pleasing to the ears. On account of your tactful behavior, Renbachien said halfway through his sentence, but everyone understood what he was implying. I was indeed rash. It turns out that we are a family. Renbachien? Who's a family with you? Don't you have any shame? The Empress and I are a family. Milord, even if we want to resist, we don't have enough weapons. Currently, Tianjin Basin is filled with bone knives. Back then, when we came here, the knives and spears were melted down and reforged into kitchen knives. Now, most people here use bone knives. Although they can be sharpened, the aboriginals are strong and heavy. Furthermore, they are wielding steel knives. After a few collisions, the bone knives will break. Therefore, we have always been powerless to resist. Is Milord here with the intention of helping us? Renbachien? Did this group of people misunderstand something? Are you asking me for weapons to rebel? May I know which family in the Yun nation you are from? Or are you sent by the imperial court? Renbachien. Someone from Great Xia came a month ago and is currently in the valley. At that time, he said that the Yun nation would definitely help us. Now that Milord is here, there is such a misunderstanding. If we have Milord's help, our chances of success will be much higher. There are only 3 spirit wheel experts in the Protectorate of the South. With the spirit wheel expert from Great Xia and Milord's companion, it is enough to restrain or even defeat them. The only thing missing now is the weapon. Renbachien. Renbachien finally came to his senses. Did this group of people think that he was sent by the Yun nation to help them resist? Thinking back, he did say that he was from the Yun nation. After all, he and Lin Xiaola didn't look like aboriginals. The aboriginals had never used outsiders before him, so they didn't suspect this. In addition, Lin Xiaola was a spirit wheel expert, and he said that he was here to help them. It was no wonder that there was such a misunderstanding. However, this misunderstanding was a good opportunity. According to him, someone from Great Xia was here too? Or was it a spirit wheel expert? Great Xia wasn't going to stop and wasn't ready to give up. From what they said, it seemed like they were going to make a big move. Needless to say, as long as he followed their words, he might even be able to infiltrate the enemy. At the very least, he knew that they were preparing something big. When the time came, he could inform Shiwanya and get rid of them. After getting rid of these people who were up to no good, it would be much easier to deal with the remnant citizens of the Hao nation. After thinking for a while, Renbachien immediately came up with an idea. You don't have the right to know my identity. You just need to know that I'm here to help you, Renbachien said faintly and put on airs. In fact, after seeing his posture, this group of people was even more convinced. This was because the people from Great Xia had the same attitude. Regardless of whether it was the people from Great Xia or the Yun nation, they looked at them as if they were looking at stray dogs. It was normal for them to be arrogant. Where is that person from Great Xia now? Renbachien asked. He went to the Golden Ring residence previously. His current location isn't something we know. Although the Nine Blades sect was considered pretty good in the vicinity of Longzhou City, it was only a small sect in the entire Tianjin Basin. Naturally, they wouldn't know too much. Consider yourselves lucky. If not for the fact that I still need your help this time, none of you will be able to go back after attacking me. Everyone was drenched in cold sweat. They were really lucky to be able to escape with their lives after attacking a spirit wheel expert. When they returned, they would definitely offer incense to the patriarch. Renbachien muttered to himself, "Leave 2 people behind to guide me. The rest of you can go back." "Sir, I'll stay behind." The one who spoke was the rather quick-witted man from before. Previously, before everyone could react, he was the first to surrender. At this moment, he was the first to do so. He also had his own thoughts. Previously, he did it to survive, but now, he wanted to hug Renbachien's thigh. As long as he hugged Renbachien's thigh, even if the rebellion against the aboriginals failed in the future, he might still be brought away. Furthermore, when the war started, he wouldn't be sent as cannon fodder to the front lines. "Sir, I'll also stay behind to guide you. If there's any trouble, I'll be able to solve it for you." The other person who spoke was the earth wheel expert who hadn't made a move since the beginning. His thoughts were similar. Although an earth wheel expert had a higher status, it also depended on which sect he was from. The two of you stay behind. The rest of you can get lost. Bring the two people on the ground with you as well. Rinpoche waved his hand. He couldn't be bothered with why those two people followed him. There were already more important things to do. Everyone looked at each other, cupped their fists toward Rinpoche, and left with their heads lowered. Only an old earth wheel expert and a man wheel expert from the Nine Blades sect were left standing there obediently. Rinpoche stretched his back and said to the two people in front of him, "I don't know much about the situation here. This time, I'm only here because I received orders. Tell me what you know." He didn't expect to encounter such a situation as soon as he entered Tianjin Basin. He was really lucky. Chapter 438. A few disciples from the Nine Blades sect tied the Death Toad and Lin Yuan to their horses and left under the cover of the night. Along the way, everyone looked at these two people from time to time. If they were killed, the Death Toad would be finished. If they were to make a move now, no one would know. That person from the Yun Nation would probably not care about such a small matter. I'm afraid there will be a war in the future. At least the two of them are a fighting force. In the end, the Earth Wheel Elder whose face was scratched by Lin Xiao sighed, and everyone gave up on this idea. In the wilderness on both sides of the road, a man and a woman hid in the dark and watched this group of people pass by with suspicious expressions. How did that coward Lin Yuan end up in the hands of the Nine Blades sect? A woman asked in a languid voice. Are they chasing after the two people you mentioned? The man asked. Most likely, but the situation is a little strange. Are we still going? I'm afraid there's a problem. Go back and find out where the two people from the Nine Blades sect went. After daybreak, Rinpoche and the others headed toward the Golden Ring residence. It would normally take 4 days to travel from Longzhou City to Jisai City, but it took them 5 days. Along the way, Rinpoche obtained a lot of useful information from the two people from the Nine Blades sect. They knew a lot more than what Rinpoche had inquired about previously. After all, there were many things that these sects knew, but ordinary people didn't. The division of power in Tianjin Basin was much more complicated than what he knew from Shiwanya. There were more than a dozen powers and hundreds of sects, big and small. Their relationships were intricate and chaotic. However, there was also an alliance behind them that had been contacting all sides to prepare for an uprising. This alliance was led by 3 major powers and 8 major sections. Among them, the 3 major factions were the 3 biggest factions in Tianjin Basin, and they controlled almost all the cities in Tianjin Basin. They were the North Alliance, the Southern Metropolis, and the Green Bellflower. Among them, the North Alliance was the most powerful, followed by the Southern Metropolis, and the Green Bellflower was the smallest. However, the internal structure of these 3 powers was also complicated. One of the 8 major sects was the Golden Ring residence. Its sphere of influence covered 6 cities, not the 3 that Rinpoche had heard before. The Golden Ring residence was the smallest of the 8 major sections. The largest one was called the Spiritual Mountain Sect. It was the largest sect in the Northern Alliance. Its sphere of influence encompassed close to 20 cities. Many of the generals in the Northern Alliance came from the Spiritual Mountain Sect. In addition, among these 8 big sects, there was one that Rinpoche found rather interesting. It was called the Manxing Pavilion, and it was located within the territory of the Green Bellflower. It was said that all the members of the pavilion were women, and one of the pavilion masters was called Qingling. From this name, one could guess the relationship between the 2 parties. Along the way, Rinpoche felt more than once that these 2 people from the Nine Blades sect were really stupid. They didn't even have the slightest bit of suspicion towards him. They didn't even know his exact identity before telling him everything they knew. However, thinking about it, it was probably because the ancient race had never had any outsiders before. The ancient race and the other races were mutually exclusive. The 2 of them had never doubted that they would stand on the side of the ancient race. In addition, they were too desperate for outside support. They wanted to get out of this cage and take back their original land. At the thought of this, he felt that they were rather pitiful. Although he was pitiful, he could not pity him. There was no right or wrong between the two sides. It was just that their positions were different, and they were enemies. After walking like this for 5 days, everyone finally arrived at GCI City, where the Golden Ring residence was located. After arriving, everyone first found an inn. The Earth Wheel experts from the Nine Blades sect went to the Golden Ring residence to deliver the visiting card, while Rinpochian took Lin Xiaola for a stroll in GCI City. GCI City was much bigger and more prosperous than Longzhou City. The streets were considered well organized. The lives of the ordinary people here were slightly better than in Longzhou City. At the very least, they looked better. Their clothes were still very old, but they were considered clean and didn't have many patches. However, they were only slightly better off. The ordinary people were still considered sallow and emaciated. In general, after visiting these two cities, Rinpochian roughly understood the living conditions of the remnant citizens of the Hao nation. Poverty had always surrounded them, and having a full stomach was probably their biggest wish. In addition, what attracted Rinpochian was the various shops on both sides of the street. Whether it was daily necessities like salt or cloth, the prices here were 50% higher than in Lon City. In addition to those common shops, there were also many unique shops. For example, a bone grinder shop specialized in sharpening bone knives, arrowheads, and other weapons. Rinpochian specially went in for a walk and finally bought a bone knife. This kind of bone knife had a very sharp edge and was almost as sharp as an iron knife. Its biggest flaw was its hardness and toughness, which couldn't be compared to iron products. If it were to be chopped by an iron knife, cracks would appear after a few hits. Some bones had good toughness and hardness and could be made into knives that could be used for a long time. However, these were very expensive and weren't affordable for ordinary people. Is that the disciple of the Golden Ring residence? Rinpochian raised his chin at the back of a figure in the crowd in the distance. From where he stood, he could see the other party. He was carrying a long bone knife with a row of 9 golden rings on the back of it. When walking, the golden rings would make a crisp sound when they hit the back of the bone knife. Previously, Rinpochian had heard from them that these golden rings were made using a special method. When wielding the bone knife, these golden rings would make an ear-piercing sound that would interfere with the other party's 5 senses and easily make the other party impatient. If one were to fight with a disciple of the Golden Ring residence under the sun, not only would one have to be careful of being disturbed by these golden rings, but they would also have to be careful of the reflection of the light. The Golden Ring residence had a unique technique. When wielding the knife, these golden rings would reflect the sunlight and form countless light fragments that would interfere with the other party's vision. With their ears and eyes disrupted by light, it would be difficult for even a level 1 Golden Ring residence disciple to deal with them. Yes, sir, the Nine Blades sect disciple replied. The Nine Blades sect disciple replied. This person's name was Lu Xing, and the Earthwill elder was called Lu Changme. While Rinpochian was strolling around the city, the Empress was sitting in the garden in a daze. Without that person by her side, these days were getting more and more boring. She wasn't even interested in watching television. Sure enough, it was more interesting when he was around. In the past, she had always been alone and didn't feel anything. However, after having someone by her side, it was especially easy to feel lonely. Has there been any news from him? The Empress asked without raising her head. Your Majesty, Sir Ren didn't bring the radio with him this time. Qing Yuan whispered behind her. After that, she turned her head and stuck out her tongue at Hong Luan. Her eyes were full of smiles as she thought, Sir Ren has only been gone for a few days and Her Majesty already misses him. The Empress sat for a long time before getting up and walking to the candy tree. The candy on the tree was already 1/3 gone. At that time, Rinpochian had solemnly vowed that he would return after finishing the candy. The Empress picked up a pair of scissors and cut off another piece of candy. When she looked again, there was only half of it left. If he doesn't return after finishing the candy, I will tie him up and hang him on the tree. The Empress raised her eyebrows and thought to herself. She heard that there were 23 ways to tie someone up. She could try all of them. Chapter 439. When Renbachyen returned to the inn, he saw a few short-legged horses at the entrance and a few disciples of the Golden Ring sect with bone knives on their backs standing there. The surrounding pedestrians carefully avoided them and didn't dare to approach. The bustling street highlighted these people. The Golden Ring residence was extremely powerful locally. Even the warlord of Thorn City had to be courteous to them, let alone ordinary people who naturally stayed far away. Upon seeing Renbachyen and Lin Xiaola, they sized them up, and one of the disciples cupped his hands and asked, "Are you, sir, from the Yun nation?" Renbachyen nodded. "Our elder is waiting for you in the inn," the disciple said respectfully. Renbachyen nodded and strode into the inn. Someone inside had already heard the commotion outside. He walked out with large strides and said in a clear voice, "Young master, you must be from the Yun nation. It must have been a long journey." Renbachyen looked up. It was a man of about 40 years old. He was thin, had sharp eyebrows, a gentle attitude, and exuded a steady charm. On Earth, even if he was 40 years old, there would be plenty of women who would fight for him. He was only slightly less handsome than Renbachyen. "I'm Ling Ziquan, an elder of the Golden Ring residence in charge of external affairs." "Greetings, sir." "There's no need for formalities. You should be clear about my purpose for coming here," Renbachyen said faintly. "I've heard a little about it. This isn't a place to entertain guests, and we have neglected you by staying here. Arrangements have been made, so please move over and let the Golden Ring residents play the host," Ling Ziquan said with a smile. "All right." Renbachyen nodded slightly. He knew that entering the Golden Ring residence was just the beginning. Although this person's attitude was respectful, it wasn't as respectful as the people from the Nine Blades sect. After all, this was the difference between a large and a small sect, and he reckoned that it wouldn't be as easy to fool as the people from the Nine Blades sect. He had to pass the test of the Golden Ring residence before he could come into contact with more things. If he was exposed, he was afraid that Lin Xiaola would have to escape with him. One had to know that there was a spirit will expert in the Golden Ring residence. There were a total of 13 famous spirit wheel experts in the entire Tianjin Basin. Each of the 8 major sects had one, and the largest sect, Lingshan, had 2. However, even though there were 13 spirit wheel experts, these remnant citizens of the Hao nation still didn't dare to act rashly. At the same level, the aboriginal experts who had reached the cardinal heaven level were too terrifying, and the spirit will experts in Tianjin Basin could only rank in the bottom half of the spirit will experts. Previously, when Great Xia attacked Ziyue City, 7 spirit will experts besieged Xiongyu, the deputy protector general of the Protectorate of the North. Xiongyu died, and 2 of Great Xia's spirit will experts died in battle. The protector general of the South, Shiwanya, was stronger than Xiongyu. Together with the other 2 cardinal heaven experts, the 13 spirit will experts didn't dare to act rashly. As a result, these remnant citizens of the Hao nation needed weapons and spirit will experts for external support. Renbachyen was now a citizen of the Yun nation and had a spirit will expert as his bodyguard. As such, he was naturally treated with the highest level of respect. Everyone left the city and headed towards the most eye-catching mountain peak in the northwest direction. When they got closer, they saw that there were layers of pavilions and pavilions from the foot of the mountain to the waist of the mountain. The buildings were vaguely visible among the trees. Although the Golden Ring residence was a sect, its location was the size of a small town. When they got closer, they could see a mountain gate in front of them. On both sides, there were stone walls that were 3 meters tall that enclosed the entire Golden Ring residence. Only the eaves were exposed. In front of the mountain gate, 4 disciples stood on both sides. They were all wearing yellow shirts and brown pleated skirts with bone knives on their backs. A group of people hurriedly walked out of the mountain gate and welcomed Renbachyen and the others. First, they exchanged conventional greetings. The person who came was the chief of the Golden Ring residence, Zhan Changkong. He looked to be around 60 years old and had a dignified appearance. Behind him was his wife, who looked to be in her early 30s. She had a graceful figure and was extremely beautiful. However, Renbachyen had heard from the people of the Nine Blades sect about some famous characters in the Golden Ring residence. He knew that this person was already over 40 years old and was a famous beauty when she was young. She was known as the painting fairy, and it was said that her painting skills were superb. In addition to the two of them, there were also the two inner deacons, the law enforcement deacon, and the outer deacon beside him. Out of the 6 deacons in the residence, 4 appeared. After all, Rinpoche was an envoy from the Yun nation, and they had no choice but to treat him seriously. Even without mentioning Rinpoche's identity, Lin Xiaola's strength as a spirit will expert was enough for them to treat her this way. "Young master, you have another companion. Is she in the carriage?" After the conventional greetings, Zhan Changkong asked. He was still very curious about this spirit will expert. He heard that this person was only a young lady, but she was already at the spirit wheel level. He was afraid that there would be another person like Qi Zixiao and Li Yuanzhu in the future. Rinpoche turned his head and opened the curtains. Indeed, Lin Xiaola was sleeping soundly inside. She had really let go of herself during these 2 trips with him. She was even more so than when she was in Qingxin Palace Hall. Rinpoche didn't say anything. He took out a piece of milk candy and threw it into his mouth. After chewing it twice, he blew on Lin Xiaola. Then, Lin Xiaola lay there with her eyes closed, sniffled, and swam toward him. Looking at her salted posture, Rinpoche really wanted to take off his shoes and stretch out his feet without saying anything. If he remembered correctly, Lin Xiaola's sense of smell was much more sensitive than that of ordinary people. However, it was a little inhumane to do so, so he eventually gave up on this tempting idea. It was mainly because Rinpoche was afraid that she would scratch him out of anger. "Count to 3. Otherwise, I will throw this candy away." Rinpoche took out a piece of candy and slowly unwrapped it. 3. Rinpoche turned around and threw the candy into the distance. A gust of wind blew past Rinpoche. Lin Xiaola appeared in the air, grabbed the white rabbit creamy candy, threw it into her mouth, and questioned him, "What about 1 and 2? Do you even know how to count?" Rinpoche felt that it was really embarrassing to be questioned by someone from Dayo like this. Everyone looked at Rinpoche teasing the spirit will expert like he was teasing a pet. They couldn't believe that this was the spirit will expert. However, when she came out of the carriage to catch the candy, she displayed her agility and speed. Everyone had to admit that she was indeed a spirit wheel expert. In everyone's impression, spirit wheel experts were either dignified, arrogant, or otherworldly. At least, this was what they knew. For example, it was rare to see the great elder in the sect even once a month. Most of the time, he would only practice hard in the mountains or climb over the cliffs around the basin to search for medicinal herbs. Every time they met, he would only say a few words. In their minds, this was how a spirit wheel expert should be. Lin Xiaola was too different from the spirit wheel experts that they knew. However, after carefully sizing her up, she looked to be about 16 or 17 years old. Her body hadn't matured yet, her hair was tied up in a simple bun, and her face was delicate and pretty. In a few years, she might even become a beauty. She was wearing a silk tube top and a short skirt, which was somewhat similar to how the Aboriginals dressed. However, perhaps this was the current trend in the Yun Nation? After taking a closer look at Lin Xiaola's appearance, everyone suffered another blow. Thinking about how they were already so old and hadn't even crossed the path to heaven, they felt that they had wasted their years. They had to admit that there were indeed geniuses in this world. "I'm Zhan Changkong. Please." Zhan Changkong sorted out his emotions and introduced himself. Seeing that Lin Xiaola didn't seem to care, he gestured to Rinpoche. Rinpoche and Zhan Changkong walked side by side while Lin Xiaola stared at the bag of candy hanging from Rinpoche's neck. Her gaze swayed along with the candy bag. Painting Fairy wanted to chat with her, but she didn't know her temperament. Seeing that her attention was focused on the person in front of her, she gave up on the idea. However, she thought to herself that she didn't know what was so special about this man from the Yun Nation that such a genius would favor him so much that she couldn't bear to let go of him. If Rinpoche knew what she was thinking, he would laugh like crazy. Chapter 440. Where are you two from? How should I address you? Wang Jing, my surname is Yi. Call me Yi Yunxian. Ren Baqian made up a random name. He didn't know much about the Yun nation and only knew of two places. One was the capital of the Yun nation, Wangjing, and the other was Qingfeng City. As for the culprit, she only knew of one person, Yi Ku, the warlord of Qingfeng City. That fellow had the audacity to rob her of a batch of silver, and the empress had already arranged for his entire family to be exterminated. After all, he was only pretending to be a Yun nation merchant at the beginning. He didn't do much research on the various aspects of the Yun nation. He didn't expect that a freak combination of factors would lead to the current situation. Wild cloud immortal, overflowing with immortal qi. What a good name, Painting Fairy praised. Previously, the two of you from the Nine Blades sect did not speak in detail. I wonder if Mr. Yi could tell us the detailed purpose of your visit? External Warden Ling Ziquan asked. His question was also what everyone wanted to ask. This was what everyone wanted to know the most at the moment. At this moment, everyone was in the middle of the banquet. 17 glowing pearls hung in the air. The light was very good and soft, not dazzling at all. It was also not as oppressive as the lamps. The entire hall was brightly lit. Rinpoche looked at it enviously. This wasn't an ordinary night luminescent pearl. Night luminescent pearls weren't this bright. This thing was almost as bright as a 40-watt light bulb. It could definitely be considered a treasure. At the highest table were Zhan Changkong and Painting Fairy. Slightly below them were Ren Baqian and Lin Xiaola. Further below them were the two people from the Nine Blades sect. Opposite him were the 6 great deacons of the Golden Ring residence. At this time he finally saw all of them. We have the same enemy. As he spoke, he glanced at Lin Xiaola from the corner of his eye and saw that she was setting up a tower. She piled up the candies that Rinpoche had just given her, took out a piece from the pile, and scattered it all over the place. Everyone nodded in agreement. The aboriginals were indeed their common enemy. They occupied your homes and forced you to live and reproduce in such a place. Most of you will never be able to take a step out of here. Like a bird in a cage. A mournful look appeared on everyone's face. Rinpoche's words struck a chord in their hearts. No one was willing to be kept like a caged bird here, even if this place was so big that most ordinary people wouldn't be able to walk around it in their entire lives. That did not hide the fact that they were being held here. The vast and boundless world outside was what they yearned for. This is the best chance you've had in years. Dayo has just had a war with Great Xia and is now at war with us. They have almost no time to care about other things. If you launch an attack at this time, they will be attacked from the front and rear, and will definitely be in chaos. With us restraining the northeastern forces, the pressure on you will be the least. In the north, there was still Great Xia. Presumably, they would not sit idly by. At that time, there would be wars everywhere, and they would definitely not be able to hold on. This is your best chance to leave this place and take back your original land. Rinpoche spoke very slowly. Even though he was talking about something that everyone already knew, it struck a chord in everyone's heart because everyone was thinking the same thing. Wasn't this the reason why the people from Great Xia came? This was indeed the best opportunity in 70 years. If he wanted to wait for another opportunity, who knew how long it would take? How many years would it take? We are aware of this matter as well. However, it wasn't just empty talk if he wanted to start a war. I wonder if you can give us some help? Zhan Changkong asked bluntly. Both parties had the same goal, so there was no need to probe each other. What he wanted was to get to the point as soon as possible. 20,000 spear tips and 5,000 swords. Of course, these aren't free gifts, Rinpoche said faintly. What are your conditions? You need to start a war as soon as possible, preferably within 3 months. In addition, there are some things that I'm afraid you can't decide on, Rinpoche said. Even though everything was fake, the conditions still had to be stated. The harsher the conditions, the easier it would be for the other party to believe them. If he didn't state any conditions, there might be some loopholes. Many times, people were strange. On one hand, they hoped that others would be more generous to them. On the other hand, when the other party was really generous, they would become suspicious. We aren't ready yet. Zhan Changkong said. Time flies. By the time you are ready, Dayo will be ready too. According to the information I received, they are already training new soldiers. How many? Zhang Changkong quickly asked. 40,000. As soon as he said this, the room suddenly became quiet. 40,000 soldiers wouldn't be able to do much in either Great Xia or the Yun nation. But if it were 40,000 ancient race soldiers, that wouldn't be a small number. There was silence in the room. Renbaqian looked down while the others pondered in silence. This matter is too big and doesn't involve the Golden Ring residents alone. We will discuss it later. Mr. Yi, why don't you meet the higher-ups of our alliance and discuss this in detail? This matter wasn't something that the Golden Ring residents could decide. Zhang Changkong thought about it and put this matter aside. It was enough for him and the others to know the purpose of this person and some other information. The rest would be left to others. When can I meet the higher-ups of your alliance? Renbaqian asked. I don't have much time to waste here. Mr. Yi, you must be tired from the long journey. After tonight's banquet, we will send someone to send you there tomorrow. The journey will take 8 to 9 days. Let's toast to Mr. Yi first. No matter what, you are our friend. Zhang Changkong raised his wine cup and toasted him from afar. Cheers. Renbaqian drank it in one gulp. His eyes moved slightly. The taste of this wine was unexpectedly good. Even though the alcohol content wasn't high, it was sweet and palatable. There was also a kind of plant fragrance. After drinking this cup of wine, he felt refreshed and the tiredness from the continuous days of travel had dissipated. Mr. Yi should have never drunk this wine before. After brewing, this wine has to be stored in the trunk of a hanging tree for a year before being sealed in a mud jar for 3 years. The wine that Mr. Yi drinks is produced from a 1,000-year-old hanging tree. Every year, less than 50 liters are brewed. Even I can't bear to drink it. Indeed, it's not bad. Renbaqian nodded. He finally found a good point about the remnant citizens of the Hao nation. This wine was brewed rather well. In the future, he could gather a group of people to specialize in brewing wine. Come. Zhang Changkong clapped his hands again. 16 young girls around 16 years old entered the hall. 8 of them held musical instruments and stood at the side. The other 8 girls held ribbons in their hands and danced in the room. As the girls danced, their graceful figures were faintly discernible under the light muslin. Their ribbons fluttered in the air, attracting Renbaqian's attention. He had to admit that the remnant citizens of the Hao nation were much better than the aboriginals in this aspect. The dance of the aboriginals was full of primitive wildness. Even though it was interesting to watch it occasionally, it wasn't as suitable and aesthetically pleasing as the dance of the young girls in the hall. In particular, one of the young girls exuded the vitality of a young girl from head to toe. Her skin was fair, her appearance was excellent, and every frown and smile was extremely attractive. Compared to the 2 outstanding girls that he had seen in this world, her appearance wasn't inferior at all. The most attractive thing was her eyes. They were clear and full of curiosity, as if she was a young girl who didn't know about the world. Renbaqian found a second good point about the remnant citizens of the Hao nation. When the time comes, he could gather a group of them and dance in the palace when he had nothing to do. Well, he also had to get those 17 pearls on his head back. Zhang Changkong paid attention to Renbaqian's expression. Seeing that Renbaqian was fond of them, he smiled and said, If Mr. Yi likes them, I can make the decision to gift them to you. I only hope that you will treat them well in the future. Residence Chief? The rest of the people were immediately shocked. The rest of the 8 girls didn't matter, but one of them was the residence chief's youngest daughter. She was usually treated like a treasure by the residence chief. She actually appeared among these people. This was enough to shock everyone. However, Zhang Changkong's words were even more shocking. Everyone looked at Painting Fairy, but realized that she didn't seem to have heard anything. Zhang Changkong looked at Renbaqian with a smile in his eyes. There was also a tinge of anticipation in his eyes. He thought to himself, no matter what, there will be a battle in the future. If they won, it would be fine. If they lost, I'm afraid that not many people would survive. In particular, Dayo wouldn't let people like the Golden Ring residents stay. Even though sending Kai-Xian away didn't sound good, it was an opportunity for her. Even if she lost, she could still survive. Chapter 441. After hearing Zhang Changkong's words, it would be a lie if Rinpoche said he wasn't moved. He didn't care about the rest except for the girl. Not only was she beautiful, but her eyes were also as clear and transparent as a lake. There was also the innocence in her eyes, as well as the curiosity of a baby. To men, this was a fatal temptation, and they wanted to protect that innocence. However, thinking about the empress who was still waiting for him to feed her and his identity, Rinpoche shook his head and said, "Thank you for your kindness, but I appreciate it." "But you don't like her?" Zhang Changkong couldn't help but ask. At this moment, his mood was extremely complicated. If Rinpoche accepted directly, he would be worried. But if he rejected it, he would be unhappy. How could he reject his own daughter? Was this person blind? "I'm here to form an alliance and have no interest in anything else." Rinpoche still rejected. After he rejected, he realized that those attendants were relieved, but Zhang Changkong was very unhappy. This made him wonder if Zhang Changkong really liked to give away his daughter. Also, why did those attendants feel relieved? "Just now, you even said something to stop me. Could it be that your lover is inside?" As the dance ended, these women left one after another. Rinpoche felt a little regretful because those eyes were really unforgettable. At night, when Rinpoche went back to rest, Zhang Changkong and Painting Fairy returned to their room. "Are you really in such a hurry? Aren't you afraid of entrusting her to the wrong person?" Painting Fairy asked after entering the room. Previously, she acted as if she didn't hear anything, but now that she was back, she immediately spoke. It was obvious that she wasn't calm. "Although you mentioned this before, I didn't expect you to be so anxious. We just met, and you don't even know his temperament. You actually want to entrust Xian, or to him. Time waits for no man. Qi Zixiao has already arrived in Gu City. At this time, she isn't in Lan City, but is here. It's hard to predict her intentions." Zhang Changkong sighed. "What?" Painting Fairy was shocked when she heard this. Everyone in the entire Tianjing Basin feared and hated that famous woman. "Is this true? It can't be wrong," Zhang Changkong said. "Therefore, even if I don't understand this person, I can't care too much. If there are unforeseen circumstances, it will be too late to consider this matter." Moreover, Dayo wasn't scary. What was terrifying was the endless number of barbarians in the 60,000 mountains. Even if they managed to get out of the valley, he did not know if they would be able to chase the barbarians back and block their counterattack. He did not know how many people would die and how many would survive. What's more, Kai-Xian is too pure. If something happens to us, I'm afraid that she will suffer a lot in the future. Since that was the case, he might as well find a backer. "We don't have that much time and opportunity to slowly choose," Zhang Changkong said after a pause. Under normal circumstances, his daughter's looks would naturally be the target of countless pursuers. But in times of chaos, it became her disaster. In addition, she was innocent and ignorant of worldly affairs. Whether or not she could protect herself in this chaotic world was truly worrying. Rather than that, it was better to find a backer. No matter how bad it was, it wouldn't be that bad. After listening to Zhang Changkong's words, a complicated expression appeared on Painting Fairy's face. Although she was reluctant, she didn't speak anymore. "Well now, tomorrow, the mansion will send someone to send him to Heavenly Cloud Mountain and have Kai-Xian go with him. With Kai-Xian's talent, looks, and temperament, no man will not be tempted after interacting with her for a few days," Zhang Changkong said with a complicated expression. After a long time, Painting Fairy sighed, got up, and left the room. The next morning, Rinpoche woke Lin Qiala up after washing his face. In order to keep her awake, he played a little game with her. He threw the candy to the left, and Lin Qiala appeared in the air like a gust of wind. Then, Rinpoche took out another candy and threw it to the right. After catching 5 or 6 candies, Lin Qiala couldn't help but say faintly, "Why do I feel that something isn't right? You eat and sleep every day. You will get fat and your body will rust. You need to exercise." Rinpochen threw a candy behind him, and Lin Xiaola immediately disappeared from his sight. Ling Ziquan, who had been standing in front of the courtyard for a long time, didn't know how to react. Finally, he coughed. "Mr. Yi, please have breakfast." Following Ling Ziquan's words, a few maids brought their breakfast to the courtyard. "If there's anything you don't like, just tell me. When do we set off?" Rinpochen asked. "We can set off after breakfast." After breakfast, Rinpochen packed up his things and waited for someone to call them. After about 2 hours, Rinpochen was a little impatient when Ling Ziquan finally arrived. "Mr. Yi, everything has been arranged. Please follow me." As Ling Ziquan walked out, they realized that they were on the way to the mountain gate. When they were near the gate, they saw a large group of people in the distance. "Mr. Yi, I have already arranged for someone to bring you there. There will be someone to take care of things along the way, so you don't have to worry." Zhang Chongkong turned around and cupped his hands when he saw Rinpochen. "Thank you." Rinpochen cupped his hands. Then, the crowd split into two. In front of them were 6 horses and a rather gorgeous carriage, as well as the ox cart that Rinpochen came with. "Mr. Yi, let's cut to the chase. We will meet again in the future. Let's drink and chat merrily when we meet again." Zhang Chongkong cupped his hands. "Let's meet again." Rinpochen cupped his hands, thinking that when they met again, they would probably want to swallow him alive. Since that was the case, it was better not to meet again. At least after staying at the Golden Ring sect for a night, he didn't have a bad impression of this place. Unfortunately, they were on different sides and were destined to be enemies. There was nothing much to say. "Let's meet again." Everyone cupped their hands. Rinpochen looked at the 2 carriages in front of him. Seeing that no one wanted him to get on the carriage, he got on his own ox cart. Then 8 people came out from the crowd and got on their horses. 2 of them were responsible for driving the carriage. One of them was the elder in charge of external affairs, Ling Ziquan. As for the 2 people from the 9 Blades sect, he didn't see them. "Mr. Yi, just let me know if anything happens along the way." Ling Ziquan smiled at Rinpochen as he sat on the horse. His smile was complicated. Rinpochen nodded, turned his head, nodded at Zhang Chongkong and the rest, and entered the ox cart. When the ox cart started its journey, Rinpochen began to ponder about the carriage behind. When he first saw it, he thought it was prepared for the 2 of them. He didn't expect it to be completely different, which made him feel a little strange. Could it be that there was something on this carriage? Rinpochen's mind raced. Could it be that the dancers from yesterday were on it? He didn't know if that woman was among them. However, even if there was, he wouldn't dare to accept them. If he did, the Empress would skin him and hang him on the city wall to dry him like bacon. He was very clear about the Empress's temperament. If he went to a brothel to drink in Lan City, as long as he didn't go overboard, the Empress might turn a blind eye. Moreover, there was Tong Jinye, the old bastard, to take the blame for him. The Empress seemed to be more interested in beating him up. However, if he wanted to keep a mistress in his golden house, Rinpochen thought for a while and didn't think too much about it. At most, he would ask Ling Ziquan to bring her back when they reached the destination. Whoever wanted her could have her, but he didn't dare to. They traveled all the way until noon, when everyone stopped to take a break. Rinpochen had been paying attention to the movements of the carriage. Sure enough, when the carriage stopped, a hand reached out to the side and pulled open the curtain. A girl's face appeared from behind the curtain. It's really her, Rinpochen thought. It was the girl from last night, whose eyes were as clear as the bottom of a lake, and who gave people the feeling that she was ignorant of worldly affairs. At this moment, she was wearing a light green dress and had her hair combed into a young girl's bun. Compared to yesterday, she looked more lively. "Mr. Yi, father asked me to send you to Mount Tianyun." That girl imitated others and cupped her hands at Rinpochen, following which she grinned innocently. "Your father? Is he?" Rinpochen immediately caught this word. 3rd Mississippi, Ling Ziquan nodded at the girl and said to Rinpochen, "She is the youngest daughter of the chief. This time, she will accompany me to send Mr. Yi to Mount Tianyun." Rinpochen looked at that girl and couldn't wrap his head around it. Yesterday, Zhang Changkong almost gave those dancers to him, right? Didn't that include her? Or did he misunderstand something? He must have misunderstood something. Yesterday, she shouldn't have been included. It was just the others. However, that didn't make much sense. The other girls from last night could only be said to be good-looking, nothing more. For Renbaqian, who was used to seeing the Empress and Li Yuanzhu, they weren't attractive at all. Compared to the flat-chested girl, Lin Xiaola, she was a little inferior. He really didn't expect that the chief of the Golden Ring residence would actually let his own daughter dance. Renbaqian pondered and felt that he might have misunderstood yesterday. Chapter 442. Mr. Yi, is it very big outside? Mr. Yi, how big is it outside? Mr. Yi, have you seen the sea before? What does the sea look like? What color is it? I read that there are no boundaries. Is that true? Mr. Yi. Since noon, Renbaqian had been hearing Mr. Yi and questions. Renbaqian couldn't help but ask, "Are you 100,000 wise?" Although Renbaqian said this, he didn't feel annoyed. This girl had a special quality that made it hard for people to hate her. Even if she asked some very childish questions, it would only make people feel that this was how she should be. What is 100,000 wise? Renbaqian was speechless. You will know when you see it with your own eyes in the future. It's better to see it with your own eyes than to hear it from others, Renbaqian replied. He had never seen the sea in this world. What if he said it was blue, but it was actually red, yellow, green, or black? There was also the Red Sea and the Black Sea on Earth. Although he had never been there and didn't know if they were really red or black, at least some parts of the Yellow Sea were indeed yellow, mainly because there was too much sand in the water and the seawater was turbid. I don't know when I can go out and take a look. Speaking of going out, Zhang Kaixin was a little distracted. She hadn't even gone far before, and the furthest she went was when she went to Mount Tianyun with her father. As for Tianjing Basin, she knew from a very young age that she couldn't go out because it was full of ferocious barbarians. Her father and the uncles in the residence all hated the barbarians. She was imperceptibly influenced from a young age, so she didn't hate the barbarians. She just wanted to go out and take a look. She heard that the outside world was very big and beautiful, even more beautiful than the Golden Ring residence. Zhang Kaixin was in a daze for a moment. Renbaqian looked at the side of her face before shifting his gaze elsewhere. Zhang Kaixin had the characteristics of immigrants from the Han nation. Her forehead was very wide, her facial features weren't very exquisite, and her mouth was a little big. However, her facial features were just right on her face, giving people a breathtaking feeling. No matter who saw her, their first reaction would be that she was beautiful. Renbaqian didn't mind admiring her beauty, but he didn't want to get too close to her. Mr. Yi, is the Yun nation very big? I heard them say that it's very prosperous, even more prosperous than Jiasai City. Zhang Kaixin only stayed quiet for a while before turning her attention to a new problem. After Zhang Kaixin asked a bunch of questions, she suddenly stopped and stared in one direction. After a few minutes, she ran over happily. Renbaqian was a little astonished at first. He looked at her and realized that she was chasing a butterfly. A journey that would normally take 8 to 9 days had taken Renbaqian and his group 12 days. On 2 of those days, Renbaqian returned to Earth, and there were other times when Zhang Kaixin chased butterflies and other insects far away. Even though Renbaqian tried his best to avoid it, he still became familiar with the girl named Zhang Kaixin after 12 days. After all, she was the kind of girl that was hard to guard against and hated. Even if they knew that they were enemies, they would gradually accept her. Even Lin Xiaola was very familiar with her. However, being familiar didn't mean that their relationship was good. On the contrary, there was a reason why their relationship wasn't so good. It happened on a sunny afternoon. When the flower fades, the green apricot grows small. When swallows fly, green water and people circle. The willows on the branches blew less and less. There are plenty of fish in the sea, a swing on the wall and a path on the other side. Passers-by outside the wall, while the beauty on the wall laughs. The laughter gradually subsides, and the sound gradually dies down. Amorous feelings are annoyed by heartless feelings. Renbachien pulled open the curtain of the carriage and looked inside. He saw Jean Caissien poking her head out to look at the road on both sides. She was singing a song with a happy expression on her face. Jean Caissen's face was filled with joy. In fact, she was always happy. These days, Renbachien saw happiness, cheerfulness, and vitality in her every day. It was as if the word worry didn't exist for her. The people who were traveling with her looked at her with doting eyes. Her cheerfulness also infected the others, and even the journey wasn't so boring. "Let's take a break," Renbachien said to the driver as he stretched. After a while, the entire group stopped by the roadside. Next to them was a stretch of farmland. There were farmers doing farm work, and there were also children running on the small paths between the fields. The group stopped, and everyone dismounted from their horses to stretch their muscles. "Mr. Yi, what kind of clothes do people wear in the Yi Nation? Is it the kind you wear?" Jean Caissien jumped off the carriage, ran to Renbachien's side, and continued to ask questions. However, after a few minutes, she saw a butterfly in the distance and ran over happily. Renbachien felt that she probably knew martial arts, which could be seen from the way she got off the carriage. However, when she chased after the butterfly, she acted like an ordinary person. She didn't reveal any martial arts, and her movements were a little clumsy. After a while, Jean Caissien ran back from a distance with a big blue butterfly in her hands. She was very careful, afraid that she would damage the butterfly. Every time she got off the carriage, she couldn't help but catch the butterfly when she saw it. However, when she left, she would release the butterfly. "Look, it's so beautiful." Jean Caissien ran to Renbachien's side and held the butterfly with both hands for him to take a look. "Very beautiful," Renbachien echoed. Jean Caissien ran to Lin Xiaola's side and said, "Sister Lin, look." "Oh, it's so beautiful." A gust of wind blew, and Jean Caissen's hands became empty. "Oh, it's not very delicious." Lin Xiaola smacked her lips and said with some regret. Jean Caissien was stunned. She opened her mouth wide and couldn't say a word for a long time. After a while, she realized that her butterfly had been swallowed by Lin Xiaola and quickly ran back to the carriage. "Did you do it on purpose?" Renbachien watched her run back to the carriage before walking to Lin Xiaola's side and asking casually, "What on purpose?" "I really want to eat it, but it doesn't taste good," Lin Xiaola said lazily. Renbachien didn't say anything else. However, when Jean Caissien got off the carriage at night, her eyes were a little red. It seemed like she had been crying in the afternoon. He wasn't sure if she was crying about the tragic fate of the butterfly or crying about her baby being eaten by Lin Xiaola. This was also the first time Renbachien saw her look unhappy. The next day, Jean Caissien was full of energy again. However, she didn't go near Lin Xiaola anymore after catching the butterfly. When she released the butterfly, she would first check if Lin Xiaola had returned to the carriage and acted as if she was guarding against thieves. After 11 days of travel, Mount Tianyun was already in sight. "How much longer?" Renbachien lifted the curtain and asked as he looked at the mountain in the distance. "Mr. Yi, we will arrive in 1 day." In Gu City, the Empress looked at the empty candy tree and was in a daze for a long time. Without the colorful candies, this was just a withered tree. After Renbachien left, she would be alone. "Your Majesty? What do you want to eat for dinner?" Hong Wan asked from behind the Empress. "Your Majesty?" Hong Wan called out softly again. "What?" The Empress came back to her senses. "What do you want to eat for dinner?" "Up to you," the Empress replied faintly. After dinner, the Empress suddenly said, "Get ready. I want to go to Tianjing Basin tomorrow to take a look. I still don't know what kind of life the remnant citizens of the Hao Nation are living under my rule and why they are always restless. I will inform Protector General Shi to make arrangements." "There's no need to inform him," the Empress stopped her. "I want to go and take a look myself and don't want to listen to his nonsense." "Your Majesty!" Qing Yuan and Hong Wan were shocked. Following which, they asked, "Your Majesty, I will inform Deputy Commander Xiong." Chapter 443. 1 day later, Without Shi Huanya knowing, the Empress brought Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan to Longzhou City. With the Empress's skills, she naturally wouldn't be discovered if she wanted to avoid other people. It is said that this is a dragon vein that runs through the entire Tianjing Basin. The mouth of the dragon faces north, so it is said that Tianjing Basin can conquer the world, the Empress said as she looked at Longzhou City, which was not far away. Of course, she didn't believe in such things. Conquer the world? Who dares to touch my world? A group of people who were locked up here were still delusional. The Empress was still dressed in red, and Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were dressed in green. The three of them standing on the road were extremely eye-catching. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan carried a small bag on their backs that contained many important things, such as the Empress's erguotu. There was also a change of clothes. The three of them arrived at the city gate and saw a long queue in front of them. Go and ask what's going on, the Empress said. Qing Yuan went forward for a while and returned. Mistress, what is the entrance fee? The Empress frowned. Tianjing Basin was under her rule, so why didn't she know about the entrance fee? After thinking for a while, she didn't think too much about it. This would naturally be rectified in the future. Did you bring money? Qing Yuan, Hong Yuan, the two of them were at a loss. They had prepared a lot of things before coming, but they only thought about what the Empress needed. They were afraid that the Empress wouldn't like the food, so they packed some spices and forgot about the most important thing, money. After all, there was no place in the palace where money was needed. Money was something that was too distant for them. Mistress, please forgive us. We forgot about the money. Shall we go back first? We will come back tomorrow after we withdraw the money, the two of them whispered nervously. The Empress raised her eyebrows. She never thought about these things when she went out with Ren Baqin. If she didn't see the entrance fee at the city gate, she wouldn't even remember to use money. What would Ren Baqin do if he encountered such a situation? The Empress recalled Ren Baqin's style and then relaxed her frown. Forget it, let's use another method. What method? Let's think of a way to enter the city first, then find a rich man and rob him. The Empress believed that if Ren Baqin was here, he would definitely use this method. Both of them were stunned. Young miss, Her Majesty is going to rob money? If others knew about this, the two of them would definitely be cursed to death. That's settled then. Let's go to another place to enter the city. The Empress gestured for the two of them to pass through the fields near the city and find a remote place. Carrying one of them in each hand, they crossed a few hundred meters in a few seconds, crossed the city wall, and landed in the city. The Empress moved so quickly that the patrolling soldiers on the city wall didn't notice her at all. The three of them entered the city, passed through the alleys, and blended into the crowd. They looked around with great interest. Everything was new to them. The Empress was still fine, but Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were elated. Their attention had long been attracted by their surroundings, and they had completely forgotten that Her Majesty was preparing to rob them. However, even among the crowd, the three of them were extremely eye-catching. On one hand, it was because of their appearances, especially the Empress. On the other hand, it was because of their attire, especially the Empress. The Empress's bright red attire, coupled with her appearance, made it impossible for people not to notice her. The three of them were looking around, and the people around them were looking at them. The Empress quickly discovered this situation, but she didn't care. She didn't need to care about other people's opinions. In fact, there were many men who wanted to strike up a conversation. There were many merchants in Longzhou City, and there were also many rich people. Naturally, there were many people who had a stomach full of thoughts. However, the Empress's aura was too strong, and many people began to feel guilty after looking at her. As a result, the three of them actually didn't encounter any trouble. Young miss, the men are also wearing skirts. Young miss, look, that's a bone grinder. There are even bone knives there. I have never seen such a thing before. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were both excited. The Empress looked around while thinking about how to find Ren Baqin. That guy shouldn't be in Longzhou City now, right? She didn't know where he had gone. The Empress felt that it was very important to find Ren Baqin. Otherwise, there would only be two idiots by her side who knew nothing. With that guy around, at least she wouldn't have to think about robbing people. However, Tianjin Basin wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. There were more than 10 million people here, and it was really too difficult to find someone without a clue. The three of them walked around the city for half a day. After the initial novelty had passed, Qin Yuan and Hong Luan finally quietened down. The most important thing was that the two of them were starting to get hungry. The three of them had only eaten in the morning, and it was almost evening now. However, they didn't even bring any money with them, and they were too ashamed to tell the Empress that they were already hungry. The Empress heard their stomachs rumbling, but wasn't moved. After walking around the city for half a round, she had a rough idea. Generally speaking, the bigger the courtyard, the richer it was. After looking around for a long time, there was one courtyard that was the largest. It was located in the northern part of Longzhou City, and there weren't any buildings around it. This courtyard was the only one that occupied an area of more than 10 acres. There were 2 stone sculptures of a saber-toothed tiger at the entrance, and there were also a few guards there. If she guessed correctly, this was probably the residence of the warlord of Longzhou City. After guessing that it was the residence of the warlord, the Empress confirmed her target. With her status, she naturally wouldn't rob an ordinary person. The warlord of Longzhou City was a good target. The Empress didn't wait until nightfall. After walking around with the two of them, she headed straight for the residence of the warlord. There were a few guards at the entrance of the residence. When they saw a lady dressed in red walking toward the residence with 2 ladies dressed in green, their eyes lit up. Judging by their age, could it be that the warlord is looking for a love debt that he incurred outside? The guards secretly guessed and went forward to stop the 3 of them. This is the residence of the warlord. If there's nothing else, please leave immediately. Although the lady dressed in red had an extraordinary aura, the gate of the Prime Minister was a rank 7 official. As the guards of the warlord's residence, they didn't mind seeing all kinds of extraordinary people. Ask the warlord to come out and see me. Forget it, I'll look for him myself, the Empress said faintly without even looking at them. Presumptuous. For you. The 4 guards were furious when they heard what the lady in red said. However, just as her hand reached for the hilt of her saber, the Empress's figure flashed. Then, she walked in as if nothing had happened. Qin Yuan and Hong Luan looked at each other and hurriedly followed. When the 3 of them entered the courtyard, the guards at the entrance swayed and fell to the ground one after another. After the 3 of them entered the courtyard, no one stopped them. Although the 3 of them walked around the residence without anyone leading them, others didn't know where they came from. Especially since they were 3 young ladies, they thought that they were the warlord's guests. After all, in Longzhou City, there had never been a case of someone knocking down a guard and barging in like this. Furthermore, the 3 of them were too indifferent and walked leisurely as if they were in their own home. In fact, Qin Yuan and Hong Luan were a little nervous. However, at the same time, they were a little excited. Robbery was something they had only heard about in stories. They didn't expect to be able to do it themselves. Where's the warlord? The Empress walked through 2 courtyards, grabbed a servant from the side and asked, "Sir is in the guest hall." The servant answered subconsciously when he heard the Empress's cold voice. "Lead the way." Yes. The servant thought to himself. He didn't know where this big shot came from, but he was actually more dignified than the warlord. When the Empress followed the servant inside, someone finally discovered that the guard outside had been knocked out, and the front courtyard immediately became noisy. Then, someone thought of the 3 ladies they had just seen and sent someone inside to report while searching the residence. At this time, the Empress had already arrived at the courtyard where the guest hall was located. She saw a room in front of her with 4 doors open, and she could see a few people sitting in the room talking. There were 2 men sitting at the top, and 3 people sitting at the bottom of the table. "Warlord Sun, I heard that someone from the Yun Nation is here?" a man at the top asked. "Mr. Fong, you are quite well informed," a man in his 50s with a long beard replied with a smile on his face. In fact, he had just received this news. He knew that someone from the Yun Nation was passing through Longzhou City, but he didn't know about it. This made him feel that his subordinates were useless. "Warlord Sun, do you know anything about their purpose?" the man called Mr. Fong asked. Warlord Sun stroked his long beard. He couldn't possibly say that he hadn't seen them before, right? He only found out about such a person passing through 10 days after they left. As a warlord, he was afraid that he would be looked down upon if he didn't even know that someone like that had passed through his own city. Following which, he raised his head and saw a lady in red leading two ladies in green toward him under the guidance of a servant. He immediately frowned. Who was this person? Why didn't anyone inform him? When the Empress walked into the room, everyone looked at her with amazement in their eyes. The Empress was silent for a moment. She thought about the excuse she had prepared and felt that there shouldn't be any problem. She said coldly, "Robbery. Hand over the money." Everyone was immediately petrified. Chapter 444. City Lord Sun was so angry that he almost laughed after recovering from his shock. Robbing the City Lord Manor? If it wasn't for the fact that the person in front of him didn't seem to be delirious, he would have suspected that the other party was suffering from hysteria. How should I address you? If you lack travel expenses, as long as you ask, I can still give you a sum of money. There's no need to joke like this. City Lord Sun's voice was rather calm. After all, he had seen all sorts of things and wouldn't get angry easily. Rob, take the money or die. The Empress was unmoved. She didn't have a good impression of these remnant citizens of the Han nation. On the contrary, she loathed them. If it weren't for the original agreement, she would have killed all of them long ago. At this moment, he was only taking money and sparing his life. This was already a great gift from him. Hearing this, City Lord Sun's expression immediately turned ugly. He had already spoken politely. Could it be that the other party thought that he, the City Lord of Longsho City, was easy to bully? Where did this madman come from to spout nonsense here? Before Lord Sun could speak, the person next to him couldn't stand it. The Empress's body swayed. Pa! The person who spoke immediately spurted out blood from his 7 orifices and collapsed to the ground. No one had expected that she would make a move just like that. The sudden turn of events shocked everyone once again. One by one, they stood up from their chairs in anger and wanted to pull out their weapons. Spirit will experts? Everyone stop. However, Warlord Sun instantly realized the other party's strength. The other party's speed was so fast that he couldn't react in time. There was no other possibility that the other party was a spirit wheel expert. As soon as he said that, everyone felt as if they had been hit by a paralysis spell. Beads of sweat flowed down their foreheads. How could it be a spirit wheel expert? Was this woman a spirit wheel expert? Senior. City Lord Sun rose to his feet and said hoarsely, "I don't know what Senior wants, but I'll do my best." At the end of the day, he still didn't quite believe that a spirit wheel expert would rob him. What was the status of a spirit wheel expert? In the entire Tianjin Basin with a population of more than 10 million, there were only 13 famous spirit wheel experts. This was because the lifespan of a spirit wheel expert far exceeded that of an ordinary person. A spirit wheel expert would be treated like an ancestor no matter where he went. Why was there a need to commit robbery? Goldie. The Empress didn't know what Rinpochen was thinking. Her goal was very clear. You, send someone to move all the gold from the vault here. City Lord Sun didn't expect that the other party would really only want money. However, he reacted quickly and immediately said to the servant who was paralyzed on the side. Ever since the Empress came in and said the first sentence, the servant was paralyzed. At this moment, upon hearing the order, he hurriedly got up and ran outside. The Empress wasn't afraid that they would play any tricks. It was just a matter of giving them another slap. These people wouldn't be able to create any trouble in front of her. Senior, please wait a moment. City Lord Sun cupped his hands. The Empress ignored him, and the room became quiet. Everyone kept quiet out of fear and didn't dare to say a word for fear of angering the lady in front of them. It was obvious that this person was not a good-tempered person. City Lord, someone has broken into the mansion. Castellan Sun looked at the guard who rushed in to report the news and expressionlessly waved his hand to chase him away. Let's go. Inform everyone to do what they are supposed to do. The intruder is a senior. Everyone waited for the time it took for an incense stick to burn before heavy footsteps could be heard from outside. A few people carried 4 boxes into the living room and placed them on the floor. City Lord Sun took a few steps forward and opened the boxes. 3 of the boxes were filled with gold ingots, and the last box was filled with all kinds of gold and silver ornaments. "Senior, they're all here." Then he obediently stood to one side and said, "Senior, they are all here." The Empress tilted her head, and Qin Yuan and Hong Luan immediately went forward to open the bag. They picked up some gold ingots from the box and placed them inside. Then, they looked at the gold ornaments. The ornaments were exquisitely made, and some were even inlaid with gems. Compared to the gold ingots, they were even more tempting. One of them packed a lot of ornaments until the bag was bulging. Only then did he stop. The Empress took a deep look at City Lord Sun. If this person's answer had been slightly off, she would have killed him with a slap. She didn't expect this person to be so quick-witted and let him escape with his life. This look made City Lord Sun break out in a cold sweat, but he still didn't dare to move. The Empress didn't say a word, turned around, and went out. Qin Yuan and Hong Luan hurriedly followed her, and their backpacks jingled as they walked. Phew! After the Empress left the courtyard, everyone heaved a sigh of relief and slumped into their chairs. This person is dressed in red, and she looks so young. Could she be? One of them was halfway through his sentence when everyone's expression changed drastically, and they hurriedly covered his mouth. "Even if you want to die, don't drag us down with you," someone beside him scolded in a low voice. With this kind of appearance, this age, and this kind of dressing, not only had he guessed her identity, but everyone else had also guessed it. However, no one dared to say it. If they said it and that person heard it, they were afraid that no one here would be able to survive. That person shouldn't be here at all. If the news of her appearance were to spread, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. The entire Tianjin basin would move upon hearing the news. Even though everyone didn't know why, that person had indeed appeared here. Furthermore, she was most likely the person that everyone was thinking of. A storm is about to arise. More than one person had this thought. After a while, everyone was finally relieved when they saw that that person didn't return. "Warlord Sun, goodbye." The man who was previously addressed as Mr. Fong stood up and said. He had to bring this news back immediately. Warlord Sun didn't intend to keep him. He was still in a daze. Why did Qi Zixiao come here? Don't be fooled by the fact that they were pondering about how to mobilize their troops every day. When faced with Qi Zixiao, no one would not be afraid. After leaving the warlord's residence, Qin Yuan and Hong Luan asked, "Miss, where are we going now?" Their bellies were already deflated. "Let's eat," the Empress said faintly. The two of them looked at each other with joy in their eyes. After finding a restaurant, the 3 of them sat in a side room. The 2 of them then opened their backpacks and piled the gold jewelry on the table. "Miss, look, this bracelet is inlaid with 9 rubies. It's the most suitable for you. This necklace isn't bad either." While the 2 of them chattered away, the Empress looked out the window at the streets and pedestrians below. After the 3 of them had their meal, they casually found an inn to stay in. After arranging a room for Qi Zixiao, the innkeeper stood behind the counter and looked in the direction of the 3 of them. Her body trembled slightly. If someone were to see her at this moment, they would definitely be shocked by her expression. Her eyes were glowing, and the corners of her mouth were raised to an angle that was difficult for ordinary people to reach. "She's too perfect. I have never seen such a beautiful person. I really want to skin her and make her into a doll to keep. I'm so excited. The thought of collecting such a beautiful doll makes me unable to control myself. My saliva is about to flow out." After standing behind the counter for a long time, she finally found some tea leaves to brew. Then she added something else to it. Following which, she swayed her body to the 2nd floor and knocked on the door. "Sir, would you like some tea? This is a good tea that I picked myself from the cliff." The Empress took a sip of erguotu and said, "Leave us. Don't disturb me without my instructions." Chapter 445. That night at the Uli Inn. Two figures appeared in the pitch-black lobby and quietly went up to the second floor. One of them took out a pipe and pierced through the window paper. Then he blew into the room forcefully, and a tube of powder was blown into the room. After blowing the knockout powder into both rooms, the two of them were relieved when they heard no sound from inside. The two of them were very confident in the intoxicating powder that they blew into the room. This powder was made from intoxicating flour and other ingredients after many years of research and development. It was very potent. An ordinary person would need 7 days to wake up after being poisoned by this powder. A man-will expert would need 3 days, and an earth-will expert would need more than half a day. Even a spirit-will expert would be slightly affected. Hee 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 hee. One of them chuckled with a charming and sweet-sounding voice. The lady boss was very excited. Tonight, she would definitely be able to make a puppet that was worthy of being treasured. Have you brought everything? The lady boss asked excitedly. 16 skinning knives and 48 spirit needles. Aren't they all in this box? Since you are in such a hurry, I'm afraid that you have found something good. What good is there for me? The other person said. It was a man's voice. Good? You will know what good it is when you see her. The lady boss chuckled and pinched him. She had already decided that for this puppet, she would give up this inn and find another city to live incognito. Therefore, she didn't hesitate to make her move in the inn. She was afraid that something would go wrong along the way. A perfect puppet was her lifelong pursuit. What did she hear people say the last time? She could die in the evening if she heard the truth in the morning. She deeply agreed with this sentence. As long as she could make a perfect puppet, she had nothing else to ask for in the rest of her life. The man laughed, took out a small bottle, opened it, and sniffed it. Then he pushed the door open. Go in, don't just stand here. The lady boss was slightly dissatisfied when she saw that he didn't move after pushing the door open. However, the man's words made her expression change. Why are you fine? The man's voice was full of disbelief. This drunken powder was the result of many years of research. Even his master was knocked out by a packet of it. One had to know that his master was a famous poison expert in Tianjin Basin, but he was still knocked out by the drunken powder, let alone other people. He saw a woman in red sitting at the table in the middle of the room. She rested her chin on one hand and looked at the door with bright eyes. She did not look like she was drugged at all. I would like to know what benefits there are. The Empress's tone was bone-chilling. The lady boss's expression changed several times before she scolded, "Useless thing. If the soft way doesn't work, then the hard way. We don't want this in anymore. Capture her and leave the city immediately." She then turned to the room and smiled. "You're unlucky to have met me. Who asked you to be so likable?" She then turned to the man beside her and said, "What are you waiting for? Don't hurt her skin, or it won't look good." Right now, all she could think about was making a puppet. It was rare to encounter such a perfect material in her lifetime, and she couldn't care less about anything else. Under her urging, the man beside her scurried toward the room. His feet moved a few times on the ground as if he was gliding. With a flip of his hand, a ray of light seemed to split the darkness in the room. It was a short knife that was 1 foot and 70 centimeters long. The gleam of the knife was like jade, but it wasn't the normal white color. The next second, the gleam of the knife appeared in front of the Empress's throat as if it was going to pierce through the throat of the woman sitting at the table. He was confident that as long as he touched it, the force would pass through the tip of the knife and shatter the other party's throat. At most, it would only leave a small mark. However, all these thoughts came to an abrupt halt in the next moment. His heart was beating wildly, and he was almost unable to control the panic in his heart. He only saw a pure white hand holding onto his knife. It was as if the knife had grown roots. No matter how much strength he exerted, it didn't move an inch. Almost at the same time, another figure flipped over his head and aimed a pair of short thorns at the Empress's eyes. The Empress's other hand tapped a few times in the air, and every time she tapped the tip of the short thorns, the lady boss only felt a strong force coming from her hand and sending her flying. According to the direction she was going, she was afraid that the top of the door would be sent flying, and the people in the inn would naturally wake up. At this moment, the Empress stood up, stretched out her hand at lightning speed, and pulled the lady boss back. She tapped one of their heads with her finger, and immediately, blood spurted out of their orifices and fell to the ground. However, if one took a closer look, both of them were still alive. Only then did the Empress unhurriedly lit the lamp and close the door. Following which, she opened the box that both of them carried with them. Inside, there were 16 knives of different sizes. The big ones were the size of a palm, and the small ones were only the size of a finger. In addition, there were a bunch of bottles and 48 silver needles. The Empress held the needles in her hand, looked at the two of them, and then inserted them into their bodies one by one. As an Empress, the most important thing to do was to be fair. There couldn't be one more person, and there couldn't be one less person. Normally, these words were useless, but at times like this, they had to be used. After all 48 needles were inserted into the heads of the two of them, the Empress sized up the 16 knives of different sizes. Although they didn't speak directly, she clearly understood what the two of them said just now. The moment she heard about the skinning knife and the spirit needles, she knew what they meant. At this moment, she naturally wouldn't be lenient. Although the two of them were already half a step away from death, these things still had to be used on them. The Empress carefully arranged the 16 knives, and then divided them into two parts of different sizes. When she felt that the two parts of the knives were about the same size, she inserted the knives into the bodies of the two of them. After doing all this, the Empress was in a much better mood. They really didn't know what was good for them to do with her. The last person who dared to do anything to her. Thinking about it carefully, she really hadn't met anyone who dared to do anything to her. Especially when it was such a disgusting and infuriating idea. If it wasn't for the inconvenience of being outside, she would have hung the two of them to dry. After torturing the two of them, the Empress rummaged through the bottles and jars on their bodies. She didn't know what the two of them had blown into the room just now, but Qin Yuan and Hong Wan, who were next door, should have been poisoned as well. After sniffing the bottles one by one, the Empress felt a headache coming on. She didn't understand these things at all. At first, she didn't expect the two of them to have so many bottles and jars on their bodies. There were more than 10 bottles in the box, and there were still 7 or 8 bottles on their bodies. She didn't know which were the antidotes and which were the poison. Seeing that the two of them were still breathing, the Empress poured some of the 2 bottles into their mouths. The woman's face began to turn green, then purple, and finally, blisters began to appear all over her body. Her body also began to swell, and after a short while, yellow liquid began to flow out of her body. In a short period of time, she became a thin piece of human skin, and everything inside her body turned into pus. On the other hand, the body of the other person became brightly colored. Streaks of blood appeared on the surface of her body, and then exploded. Finally, all that was left was a lump of flesh. After throwing the 2 bottles to one side, the Empress turned around and went out of the inn. She knocked out the waiter and the chef, and then brought them to another empty room. Only then did she bring the bottles and jars over for the two of them to test the antidote. The room just now was filled with the stench of blood and stench, and it was already unbearable to stay in. After tossing and turning for 2 hours, the Empress finally found the antidote. Even the livestock in the back of the inn were all dead. Chapter 446. The Empress gave the two of them the antidote and left the inn the next morning as if nothing had happened. However, Qin Yuan and Hong Luan were puzzled as to why the Empress had woken up so early and was actually waiting for them outside. Also, where were the inn owner and the child? The two of them had a headache as if they had been drunk. After the 3 of them left, the unforeseen event in the inn was quickly discovered, and the warlord's men surrounded the inn. However, the scene was a mess, and Warlord Sun began to doubt whether it was Cheesy Xiao. After all, with her status, how could she do such a thing? However, an old man from the magistrate's office quickly cleared his doubts. From the boxes and medicine bottles scattered everywhere, as well as the waiter, cook, and the poultry and livestock in the backyard, it was obvious that the other party was testing medicine. In addition, the traces left in the 2 rooms were similar to the smell in one of the medicine bottles. After testing the effect of the medicine, the whole process came to light. Even Warlord Sun couldn't help but say, "Sins committed by heaven can be forgiven, but sins committed by oneself can't be avoided." However, despite saying this, Warlord Sun no longer doubted the identity of that person. Both Yu Dao and Feng Er were at the Earthwheel level, yet they died so easily here. The other party was indeed a spirit wheel expert as he thought. In that case, it had to be the person he was thinking about. At the thought of this, Warlord Sun wanted to praise himself for being smart and quick-witted. If not for his quick thinking, the Warlord residence would probably be gone by now. He would go back and marry a concubine to calm himself down. Although he thought this way, he knew that a big change was coming. Tianyun Mountain stretched for hundreds of kilometers, and there were many rare treasures on the mountain. The highest peak of the mountain pierced through the clouds as if it was connecting heaven and earth. Therefore, it was called Tianyun Mountain and was also the highest mountain in Tianjing Basin. Rinpoche already knew that there was an alliance in Tianjing Basin, but he only heard about it later. However, some things were only heard later. This alliance was called the Hidden Alliance, and it had only been formed in the past 20 years. The one who organized this alliance wasn't one person, but a group of people. A group of people who had rebelled against the Hao Nation and were defeated by the Aboriginals. They had no choice but to sign an agreement and be chased into Tianjing Basin. Initially, those people rebelled against the Hao Nation for the sake of their ideals or power, but they ended up in such a state. Some of them refused to give up after entering the valley and formed the three major factions of Tianjing Basin. A portion of them had no interest in fighting for power with them. Instead, they formed their own sects, wanting to pass down all their knowledge so that one day they could go out. There were also some who were completely disheartened and lived in seclusion. Many years later, a few of them ran around and gathered all the experts who lived in seclusion, forming the first secret alliance. At that time, Tianjing Basin was also in a state of chaos. Various factions attacked each other and wanted to annex the other factions to form an independent faction. They wanted to unify all the people in Tianjing Basin before fighting the Aboriginals. During that period of time, the people in Tianjing Basin had no way of making a living. After that, the secret alliance roped in the various sects and negotiated with the three major forces. That was how the current situation came about. However, although the three great forces seemed to have stopped fighting on the surface, in reality, they were still playing dirty tricks. After all, during that period of war, the three sides had also formed many personal grudges. However, there was still a sense of righteousness. In the face of righteousness, all parties tried their best to restrain themselves. At most, there would only be some small disputes, but there wouldn't be any large-scale wars. Currently, the secret alliance was nominally united with the three major forces and various sects to form an even larger alliance. They gathered their strength in Tianjing Basin and prepared for a future war. After understanding the history of the secret alliance, Rinpoche couldn't help but admire them. He didn't admire the secret alliance, but Shiwanya. Such a large organization was created right under his nose, and he actually didn't know much about it. He could be considered a talent whose brain was full of muscles. If he didn't make this trip, he reckoned that this group of people could really stir up some trouble. After all, Tianjing Basin had been accumulating for so many years, and there were many practitioners. There were tens of thousands of man-will experts, hundreds of earth-will experts, more than 10 spirit-will experts, and hundreds of thousands of soldiers. If there were so many ants, they could even bite an elephant to death. If Tianjing Basin were to really become chaotic, Dayo would probably have to suffer a lot. In particular, the northeast was at war with the Yun Nation. In the north, Great Xia was still unwilling to give up. In the southeast, there was the Qin Nation, which no one knew what they were planning. With all these factors added up, Dayo was really doomed. When that time came, he would have to go to the 60,000 mountains with the Empress to farm and hunt, and his son would run around the village naked. Thinking about that kind of life, Rinpoche felt that it was better for them to die than for him. Unlike at the Golden Ring residence, when everyone arrived at the foot of the mountain, someone went up to report, and soon came down to bring everyone up the mountain. They followed a small path, shuttled through the forest for a while, and finally passed through a kernel. What appeared in front of Rinpochen was a farmland and a village. It was the most ordinary kind of village in the mountains. There were hundreds of sparsely scattered houses in the village, and there were crooked fences made of wood outside the houses. Some of the courtyards even had bundles of firewood. If he didn't know his destination, Rinpochen would really find it hard to believe that this was where the secret alliance was located. Weren't they all so-called experts? At the very least, they should be more outstanding, right? For example, like Huang Yaoshe, who planted peach blossoms and played the flute when he had nothing to do. However, looking at this old lady who carried 2 tall firewood into the village, she was too down to earth. Are you surprised? I was also surprised when I came here for the first time. Zhang Kaixian bounced to Rinpochen's side and looked up. Very surprised, Rinpochen answered truthfully. However, the grandparents here are very nice people. Zhang Kaixian grinned at Rinpochen, bounced to the front, and said, Grandma Hu, I'm here to see you. Girl, you're here again? The old lady looked to be in her 80s or 90s. She was carrying 2 tall firewood, but her movements weren't slow at all. She turned her head and smiled when she saw Zhang Kaixian running over. Do you need help? I can help you carry a small bundle. Zhang Kaixian deliberately stretched out a finger and gestured, indicating that it was a small bundle. Girl, you are still so considerate. My waist really can't carry it anymore. As the old lady spoke, she quickly reached out and pressed all the firewood on top of Zhang Kaixian's head. It's a small bundle. Zhang Kaixian quickly raised the firewood with both hands and watched as the firewood got lower and was about to drown her. Although it was firewood, it was very dense and weighed at least 500 kilograms. How could she lift it? It could already be said that her skills weren't bad since she wasn't immediately pressed to the ground. The people from the Golden Ring residence quickly ran over to help, but by the time they rescued Zhang Kaixian, her head was already full of firewood. Rinpochen didn't say anything and slowly followed behind everyone toward the village with Lin Xiaola. At the entrance of the village, there was an old man with wrinkles all over his face, who was wearing traditional clothes, sitting in the shade and reading a book attentively. Seeing everyone come over, he raised his head and smiled at them. Only half of his teeth were left in his mouth. Come. Someone help me see if there's a second half of this book. I have already flipped through it several times, but I don't know if there's a second half. Grandpa Qiao, I will help you in a while. I have read a lot of books these days, so maybe I have read it before, Zhang Kaixian shouted while holding a bundle of firewood. You can't read it. You definitely haven't read it before. The old man quickly said. Why can't I read it? How do you know that I haven't read it before? Zhang Kaixian wasn't convinced. Men can read it, but women can't. Girls can't read it either. The old man shook his head. Chapter 447. Do you want to read it? The old man didn't show the book to Zhang Kaixian and asked Rinpochen instead. Thank you. Rinpochen happened to be interested in this world's erotic literature and had no reason to refuse. Seeing that Rinpochen readily agreed, the old man smiled like a chrysanthemum and said, You're a good person. You're much more sincere than those who obviously want it but say no. The surrounding people were speechless. Are those who read erotic literature with you a good person? Are those who go to the brothel with you blood-related brothers? Rinpochen happily took the book and even said politely, Thank you for sharing. This made the old man smile even more happily and praised, You're a good person. You have good taste and are polite. The others didn't understand, but Rinpochen did. Only an experienced person like him would understand such things. Looking at the major forums on the internet, there were trolls running amok everywhere. Just a casual sentence would cause people to spew a torrent of abuse. Everyone was filled with hostility. Only the netizens in 1024 all said, Thank you for sharing. The original poster is a good person. Good people will have a peaceful life. There was almost no hostility. Therefore, everyone was a good person. I'll take it with me then? I'll return it to you later. Rinpochen held the book in his hand and gestured. If you like it, You don't have to return it. You can return me a new one in the future. A treasure sword for a hero and a beauty for a beauty. The old man was very generous. However, Rinpoche still felt that something was wrong. A treasure sword for a hero, a beauty for a beauty, and erotic literature for... Rinpoche felt that he shouldn't think about this in detail. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that the old man was scolding him. However, the old man was smiling like a chrysanthemum in full bloom and even gave him erotic literature. How could he let Lin Xiaola scratch his face? Rinpoche cupped his hands at the old man and put the book in his arms speechlessly. What's in the book? Let me see. Why can't women read it? Lin Xiaola came over curiously. You'll know in 50 years. Rinpoche said. After thinking about it, even though Lin Xiaola looked alright, she might not be able to get married. Maybe it would be another 100 years. When they entered the village, they would occasionally see old people sunbathing in the courtyard and watering the flowers. They were no different from the old ladies in the village. In any case, he saw a person drawing on a table in the courtyard. The person was squatting in a horse stance, one of his forearms was parallel to the table, and the brush in his hand was drawing on the paper from time to time. This person's every move looked very imposing, and Rinpoche finally felt that he had the demeanor of an expert. After all, the people here were all figures of the older generation who had survived the Great War back then. These experts weren't bumpkins, so it wasn't strange for some of them to be proficient in the four arts. Village Chief Grandpa, what are you drawing? Jean Caissien carried the firewood and jumped into the courtyard. Painting mountain, the old man said without raising his head. Jean Caissien stretched her neck to take a look at the drawing before turning her head to look at the nearby tall mountain. She said doubtfully, this mountain is a little fat. So majestic. A little short. He's accumulating momentum to break through the heavens one day. This is obviously a hill, right? This is called looking at the mountain but not seeing it. Little girl, you talk too much. The old man flew into a rage out of humiliation. Even though Rinpoche didn't see what the old man was drawing, he understood that this person wasn't an ordinary person to be able to draw a mountain that pierced the sky like a hill. Rinpoche felt that this person had the demeanor for nothing, but it turned out that he was a soul painter. As he thought about it, he added, soul painter. The old man had sharp ears, and his eyes lit up when he heard this. He laughed and said, this little fellow knows what's good and bad. The most important thing in painting is the soul, the intent, and not the form. Come, 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 little fellow. My painting can only be seen by people with good eyesight. This old man is a spirit wheel expert, just a little weaker than me, Lin Xiaola added at the right time. She gestured with one hand pointing to the sky and the other pointing to the ground. Rinpoche felt that what she meant was the difference between heaven and earth. However, what did she mean when she said it was a little weaker and gestured like that? Little girl, you talk big. The old man was so angry that he almost laughed. I won't lower myself to your level today. Little fellow, come and take a look at my painting. The old man sized her up carefully and turned to Rinpoche. Finding someone who could appreciate his painting was much more important than fighting with others. Sorry to disturb you. Rinpoche walked to the table with his hands behind his back after he finished speaking. He had a strange look on his face. This isn't a hill. This is obviously a steamed bun with the outline of another steamed bun behind it. There is also a small stone drawn on the top of the steamed bun. How is it? The old man asked complacently. Looking horizontally into a ridge and vertically into a peak. This poem immediately popped up in Rinpoche's mind. From a certain angle, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was an undulating mountain range. Good, well said. The old man immediately laughed when he heard this poem. This poem goes well with my painting. It suits the artistic conception. Is there a next line? Different heights, different distances. Not bad, not bad. The old man laughed as he added these two lines to the painting. Rinpoche felt that what the ancients said was right. Hooligans weren't scary, but a cultured hooligan. Not only was the person in front of him a cultured hooligan, but he was also a cultured spirit wheel hooligan. The little girl at the side was passively looking at the painting, looking horizontally into a ridge and vertically into a peak. She was still carefully studying the ridges and peaks in this painting. The old man then put the paintbrush aside. Seeing that Jean Caissien was still holding the firewood, he said, "Aren't you going to send the firewood to Hu Qinghua? Aren't you tired of holding it?" Jean Caissien quickly nodded and seriously said to Ren Baqin, "Your poem is really good." She then ran out with the firewood. The old man stretched out his hand and rubbed it twice before looking up at Ren Baqin and asking, "This little fellow is a member of my sect. Not bad. Not bad. What's your relationship with Yi Sanbua?" Ren Baqian's mind started to spin after hearing this. This old man knew someone with the surname Yi in the Yun nation? That person was at least 70 years old. If he was still alive, he would probably be an expert. However, he hadn't heard of such a person in Qingfeng City. In that case, there were two possibilities. Either he was an expert from the older generation, or he was the ancestor of the warlord of Qingfeng City and was long dead. Or maybe it was the old man who deceived him. There were often such scenes on TV. If he climbed up the pole and said it was his ancestor, the old man would immediately laugh 3 times and then slap him to death. After thinking for a while, Ren Baqin said, "I have never heard of this person. May I know how you know him?" The old man was silent for a moment before sighing and saying, "Is that so? I thought I had met an old friend. Time flies and things remain the same, but people have changed. Come in and talk." The old man waved his hand and seemed to be in low spirits. Ren Baqin felt that he might be overthinking, but there was no harm in being careful. After all, he was now in the hinterland of the enemy. If he succeeded, it would be easier to pacify Tianjing Basin in the future. If he was seen through, he would probably be hunted down. Chapter 448. The house was very simple and was made of ordinary wood. There was a bed, a wooden cabinet, and the place where the table should be was empty. Ren Baqin guessed that it was the table outside. However, the most eye-catching thing was the head of a lion-like beast with 6 short horns hanging on the wall. The moment Ren Baqin stepped through the door, the head suddenly opened its eyes. At the same time, the aura of a ferocious beast hit him in the face. It was as if the head in front of Ren Baqin was no longer a head, but a ferocious beast that was more than 4 meters long that was about to pounce on him. The ferocity in the eyes of the ferocious beast and the threatening aura made Ren Baqin have no doubt that he would be torn to pieces in the next second. Ren Baqin felt as if his heart was firmly grasped by a big hand, and he subconsciously reached for his gun at the back of his waist. Gulp! A clear and crisp gulp came from the middle of the throat, and it sounded like a clap of thunder in Ren Baqin's head. Ren Baqin suddenly woke up from his hallucination and saw that the eyes of the head on the wall were still open. The eyes were completely black, like a pitch-black whirlpool that could suck in one's soul. Lin Xiaola, who was beside him, was staring at the head on the wall, and her throat was still making gulping sounds. Looking at her hands carefully, he saw that her fingernails had grown by 1 centimeter. The old man carefully looked at Lin Xiaola with some surprise, then a muffled shout came from his chest, "Silence!" He flicked a steel nail from his hand and nailed it to the head of the beast. A roar was transmitted into Ren Baqin's mind. Following which, the head closed its eyes, and Lin Xiaola resentfully quieted down. Her eyes never left the head, and she secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. "Senior, this is?" Ren Baqin couldn't help but ask. Although he had seen many things in this world, such as the elongation saber and the chain in his head, and he knew that he didn't know much about this world, the abnormality of this head still shocked him. It seemed as if this head was still alive. "Back then, I met a ferocious beast in the 60,000 mountains with my master. It has been so many years, but it still hasn't settled down." The old man glanced at the head on the wall with a look of reminiscence in his eyes. "It's still alive?" Ren Baqin cried out involuntarily. "How can he be alive like this?" The old man asked with a smile. There was no body, only a head hanging on the wall. No one knew how many years had passed, and no matter how one looked at it, it could not be more dead. However, whether it was the opening of its eyes or the roar, he had just experienced it personally. What happened just now? Rinpoche asked doubtfully. He's dead but not dead, the old man said lightly. Can I trade that with you? Lin Xiaola pointed at the head, her eyes shining. Oh. What do you want to exchange for it? The old man laughed. This one is much more valuable than yours. Lin Xiaola reached into her tube top and took out 3 white rabbit creamy candies that carried her body fragrance. Judging from her expression, she seemed to be in pain. 3 white rabbit creamy fruits was her limit. What is this? The old man looked at the thing in Lin Xiaola's hand curiously. He had never seen this thing before. Rinpoche silently grabbed the 3 white rabbit creamy candies from her hand and placed another 3 in her hand. Although she was a hard-working girl, he felt embarrassed to see her being taken advantage of like this. My 3 are a little bigger. Give me another one. He didn't expect Lin Xiaola to turn around and raise an objection. Rinpoche was speechless. He silently took the 3 candies from Lin Xiaola and placed the warm one back into her palm. He couldn't be bothered with her. Creamy candies are delicious. You definitely won't be able to find them anywhere else, Lin Xiaola said confidently to the old man. Forget it. This thing is dead but not dead. It's useless for you to take it. The old man shook his head. Let's have a fight. If I win, give me that. Lin Xiaola saw that the exchange had failed, so she immediately changed to snatching it. However, this was exactly what she wanted and saved 3 white rabbit creamy fruits. What do you want that Jeshua's head for? The old man was a little puzzled. It looks delicious. Lin Xiaola was almost drooling as she looked at the head. Are you ready? I'm going up. Lin Xiaola even reminded him out of goodwill. The old man was speechless. Let's go out. I also want to see what an expert who is just a little more powerful than me looks like. The old man gestured with his hand. It seemed like he hadn't forgotten the difference between heaven and earth that Lin Xiaola had just said. Lin Xiaola's body gracefully leaped and landed in the courtyard. The old man smiled at Rinpoche before walking out unhurriedly. As soon as Rinpoche followed him out, he saw 2 figures colliding. Their figures couldn't be seen clearly at all, as if 2 gusts of wind had collided. The sound of bodies colliding was constantly heard in the air. As soon as the fight started, more than a dozen figures suddenly jumped out of the village and landed around the courtyard. All of their faces were wrinkled, and some of them couldn't even straighten their backs. These were the experts who had survived until now. After sensing that there was a fight here, they ran over to watch the fight. In less than a minute, a scream was heard. It was from the old man. Rinpoche was finally relieved that Lin Xiaola didn't suffer a loss. Stop. I don't want to fight anymore. After a while, the old man shouted again. His figure gradually turned from illusory to solid as he stood there. The old man's clothes were tattered, his face was scratched, and he had a complicated look on his face. He wasn't a weakling among the spirit wheel experts and was one of the top experts in Tianjin Basin. Losing to a young girl made him look bad. However, what was worse was the other party's methods. Why was she scratching people? She even scratched people's faces. Didn't she know not to hit people in the face? Originally, even if the old man lost, he would only say that the younger generation would surpass the older generation. At most, he would be shocked, guess the origin of the other party, and feel disappointed. He had to admit that he was old. At such a young age, even if she started cultivating in her mother's womb, how could she be so powerful? However, at this moment, he didn't have any other thoughts. His mind was filled with, who did this girl learn from? Why was she scratching people? Everyone looked at the situation in the courtyard, looked at Lin Xiaola, who was licking her claws, and then looked at the old village chief with ugly expressions. Qing Yun's sword, who had dominated the world for many years, was defeated by a little girl just like that? Where was the Qing Yun sword who had dominated the world with his sword? Qing Yun's sword? Your old bones are about to be buried in the ground. A tall old man with white hair and beard had a complicated look on his face. Finally, he cursed bitterly and leaped more than 30 meters away. After a few steps, he couldn't be seen anymore. Another old man shook his head and sighed. We are old, we are all old. More people turned around and left with complicated looks on their faces. Qingyun's sword was the name of the old village chief back then. It was a name that suppressed many people and was also a symbol of an era. Today, he was defeated by a young man, which made everyone feel a little sad and disappointed. The old man opened his mouth for a long time. After a while, he touched his face and said with a gloomy expression, "Can't we not scratch our face?" Rinpoche was speechless. It seemed like being scratched on the face was more unacceptable to him than being defeated. The old man's lips moved a few times before he sighed faintly and said, "Back then, I was also handsome, elegant, and outstanding. It was all because of this face." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.